Please take your seats. Our program is about to begin.
In 2018, I'm going to raise my voice by making every decision through the lens of, is this making the world a better place for my daughter?
By raising my son as a feminist, and also encouraging all of my friends to vote.
In 2016, the scam registered over 95,000 women to vote.
Yeah. Yes, we want to make it easier for women to get informed, make it easier to register to vote, and get to the polls.
By mobilizing tens of thousands of caregivers and domestic workers to the polls to elect candidates that listen to us, represent us, and want to move a real women's agenda for change.
By helping to pass stronger laws that protect women from domestic gun violence, we know these laws save lives.
I pledge to raise my voice by continuing to tell unapologetic stories featuring strong and complex female characters.
As executive producer of The Bold Type on Freeform, I'm creating a role model, a working woman boss that younger women can look up to, and who's not a bitch.
By empowering more girls to be in the STEAM field, it's going to be such an exciting opportunity to see more women emerging in science and technology.
I'm going to publish and make and create and share it with the world.
I'm going to use my voice to get more women at the tables where decisions are made.
To increase the number of female firefighters to 1% and African Americans to 10% within the next 5 years in the FDNY, finally getting rid of the word fireman. It's gotta go.
It's to help use the platform that we have in the WWE to help make the world a better place.
To fight for more equal opportunities for women. I pledge to find new ways for women of color to express themselves in writing.
I pledge to continue to tell women's stories, to raise our voices up. Telling our stories is the way we're going to make change happen.
And using my platform to pave the way for other females to support each other in kind and authentic ways.
There's so many injustices, war, poverty, racism, sexism, of course. So I will do what I've been doing for many years. I will raise my voice.
It's so important right now for us to be standing up for one another's issues and not just our own.
Go big or go home, and we're not going home. Let's get it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Janae Hawkins.
Last night was amazing, wasn't it? It was good, right? We talked about sex. Well, actually, we talked about a lot of sex and relationships, but today is the moment we've been waiting for. I am very, very proud to stand here and introduce our dynamic and badass 2018 Makers at Board of Directors. Are you ready? Yeah. Are you ready? Yeah. Live stream, are you ready? All right, let's bring them out.
Hi, I'm Lauren Cramsey. I'm the Global Chief Marketing Officer of Ogilvy Worldwide. I pledge to publicly disclose our gender statistics across all levels in the U.S. by June.
Woo!
Hi, I'm Olivia Douglas from BBDO. I'm an EVP there, and I pledge to develop a peer mentoring program designed to boost presentation skills, business and strategic acumen, and exposure to senior leadership.
Hi, I'm Allison Allen. I am a VP at Oath, a Verizon company, and we pledge to make mobility matter for women. That includes career development, career advancement, internal mobility, and more specifically, we pledge to increase our investment in STEM and STEAM for girls.
Hi, I'm Nikki Bell, SVP Managing Director, RGA. RGA is going to raise retention of women of color 50% by creating a culture of true belonging.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa McKnight. I'm the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Barbie. And the Barbie team pledges to launch at least 10 new role model dolls each year featuring underrepresented careers, real-life sheroes, and important women in history. Because imagining that she can be anything is just the beginning, but actually seeing that she can makes all the difference.
Good. Hi, I'm Gowdy Pius, VP of Corporate Communications at Hulu, and we pledge to double the resources dedicated to our internal women's group, Hula, so it can provide more education and leadership building opportunities in 2018. We also pledge to establish a diversity liaison to further our efforts related to the overall diversity of our workforce. Awesome. That way.
Hi, good morning. I'm Amy Emmerich, Chief Content Officer of Refinery 29. This is an organization that is already 85% female, with 79% of leadership roles filled by women. But we do pledge to implement training and education focused on fostering empathy and to create true intersectionality across the whole company.
Woo. Hi, I'm Katie Duran, Senior Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Adobe. We pledge this year to reach global pay parity between women and men.
I'm Gail Herberman, the CMO at iHeartMedia, and I pledge, along with my amazing peers at iHeart, to expand our women's network with an actual roadshow to 32 of our iHeartMedia regional officers. We're going to help mentor, understand, and support women in the company through the simple yet transformative power of conversation and connection.
Hi, my name's Kate O'Sullivan. I'm with Microsoft in the External Affairs, and I pledge 3 things. First, to help my department audit all of our external consultants, agencies, and lobbyists and others to ensure that we have 50-50 representation. 2, I personally pledge to join the Electing Women Alliance and the Bay Area Giving Circle to elect women to elected office around the country. And 3, to fund a woman entrepreneur on kiva.org.
Woo!
Hi, I'm Tracy Keim with 23andMe, the genetics company, and VP of brand there, at a company that already has a CEO that's female, and we are over 50% female. We pledge to increase our female representation in product and engineering teams to reflect overall diversity.
Woo, that way.
I am Ijenu Nwosu, Chief of Staff to the Chairman and CEO of Kaiser Permanente. And we pledge to establish gender equity as a strategic objective for the entire enterprise, which is more than 230,000 people. And we'll do this by launching a program focused on promoting and elevating our female executive population. And by 2023, we'll have increased the rate of retention and recruitment for female executives.
Ooh, that way.
Morning. Annie Bloomquist, Chief Product Officer for Sleep Number. At Sleep Number, we will have gender parity in our stores by 2017.
Kim Bozella, Head of Technology in the Americas and Technology Risk Management at UBS. We pledge to have 30% women representation in senior management positions by 2020.
Woo, that way.
Hi, I'm Deirdre Bigley. I'm the CMO of Bloomberg, and
Fan club, yes.
We have a lot of people here.
Yeah, fans. Yeah.
This year, more than 250 women are expected to run for office in the midterm elections, including a record number of female candidates for governor. In the coming months, Bloomberg will launch the definitive data visualization on the female candidates for governorships and Congress across the country. We will map the key races, detail the people, and provide a visual assessment on the changing landscape for women leadership in national politics.
Hi, I'm Lynn Lewis from the Global CMO and East Coast President. And at we pledge that we will double the number of women of color across our organization at every single level.
Good morning, Danielle Sutton, SVP of People for PayPal. PayPal pledges to maintain global pay parity between men and women and continue to share our results annually. We also pledge to conduct unconscious bias and awareness training across the entire company through this year and next year, and potentially after yesterday's session, it might include conversational design.
Good.
Marty Wolf, Chief Culture Officer at MailChimp. MailChimp is committed to elevating women's voices through sponsorship. Our senior leadership team pledges to support our employee-led women's empowerment group through mentorship and full funding. And our corporate citizenship team has committed half of its sponsorship budget to women-focused and women-founded events. And we will only consider funding and presenting at events where there are over 40% women speakers, as well as a code of conduct.
Nice. Hi, everybody. I'm Courtney Monroe, CEO of National Geographic Television Networks, and I pledge that by the end of 2020, the number of female-led companies with whom we partner, be it production companies, marketing agencies, PR firms, the number of female companies will equal the number of male-led companies. Wow.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Hulst. I'm GVP of Marketing and Strategic Partnerships for Oracle Data Cloud. And I pledge to launch a company initiative focused on gender equality and inclusion that is focused on action so that we're not just talking about issues, but we're moving toward activating change as well. Good.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Fraser. I'm a Senior Director of Engineering at Twitter. And Twitter has pledged to build a more inclusive and diverse Twitter by increasing the percentage of women to 38% and increasing the percentage of women in leadership roles to 31%.
Nice. Hello.
Hi, I'm Nicole Quinn, a consumer investing partner at Lightspeed Venture Partners. We are a VC firm that believe that the most successful teams benefit from having employees, executives, and board members from diverse backgrounds and experiences. And to that end, this week we are publicly announcing our initiative to work with our portfolio companies and asking the CEOs to build teams at every level of the organization of a diverse nature.
Awesome. Yep.
I'm Celeste Burgoyne. I'm the EVP of Americas for Lululemon. We are here today to announce that by April 2018, we will have 100% pay equity, equal pay for equal work across our entire organization. This is just the beginning of our journey to create an environment of diversity and inclusion for all.
That's great. Hi, I'm Donna Tutz. I'm a Senior Vice President at Cognizant, and we pledge to help close the gender gap in tech by continuing our programs to get more young girls into STEM, but this year adding a very specific program targeting 12,000 women in North America with deep digital skills training so that they can advance their careers at all levels at the firm.
That way.
Hi, good morning. I'm Karen Weinzeis. I'm an SVP of International Healthcare at Aetna, and we pledge that all Aetna executives will mentor or sponsor at least one high-potential woman. # mentor her.
Nice, nice.
Hi, I'm Yoko Miyashita, SVP and General Counsel of Getty Images. We pledge to develop and launch a sponsorship program for our women and diverse employees, leveraging the reach and influence of our amazing Makers at attendees and our senior leadership team.
Nice.
I'm Shelley Zalis, the CEO of the Female Quotient, and thank you. And I pledge, first of all, to help each and every one of you with whatever your goals are to achieve, because it is all achievable. So I commit to breaking all the rules in Fortune 500 companies that make no sense and rewriting the rules so that we can truly advance equality in the workplace and make it a culture of safety, security, belonging, make leadership conscious of their unconscious, be better because we can be if we choose to be, and most importantly, put women in every single equation from main stage to boardroom, and that's how we will start achieving equality, equal pay for equal opportunity. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome.
All right, so I have two pledges that I'm going to read from a couple of our board members that couldn't be with us this morning but are watching live. Roxanne Taylor, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer, Accenture. I'm committed to ending gender bias and cultural stereotypes in marketing, communications, and advertising. The goal is to eliminate bias in everything we create at Accenture and to partner with others in the industry to do the same by establishing industry benchmarks and metrics. Our attitude, you see it, you eliminate it. All right, Fiona Carter, Chief Brand Officer, AT&T. As the first to include GEM as an integral part of our copy testing, AT&T pledges to improve the portrayal of women in our ads by 20% by the end of this year. That accelerates the A&A industry initiative See Her goal by 2 years. That's it. Wow, that's it. All right, thank thank you all for sharing and bringing back incredible impact to your companies. Everyone, give it up for the 2018 Makers at Board of Directors. Woo! Take a picture.
Ladies and gentlemen, Katrina Lake and Molly Wood.
Welcome. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to have even the women backstage cheering for us when we walk out. What a great place to be.
Amazing.
So we are, Katrina, here in the middle of Hollywood. So it is a little hard to say that Silicon Valley is the worst when it comes to the treatment and representation of women. But I think we can agree we have our own special level of hell. For example, in 2017, I wrote this on my hotel notepad, 17% of startups had female founders. That number has been flat for 5 years. McKinsey, I think yesterday, showed some research that said that 4.4% of venture capital deals go to women. 2.2% of those deals go to all women teams. And yet in this landscape, you conceived, got funding for, and eventually had a successful IPO of a $1 billion unicorn company, Stitch Fix. Katrina, start at the beginning. I mean, when you look back on that journey and those meetings with venture capitalists, like the number of no's, are we talking it could fill a bathtub or like an Olympic-sized swimming pool?
It was, actually, I can tell you how many people said yes, and it's the 3 people that were investors in Stitch Fix. And I think I have a Google spreadsheet of all of the no's and all of the why's, and yeah, it's probably more in the swimming pool range than a bathtub. It's, 50 plus.
Yeah. Because not only were you a woman founder, you were also pitching a company for women, so double whammy, one assumes. But what were the whys that they would give you?
There were a lot of, I think one of the things that was a blessing to me in starting a company was that in some ways, like I was naive. I had never managed another person in my life when I started Stitch Fix. I had been like an associate at 2 different companies, like producing investment memos. Like I really hadn't done this before. And so I could look at everything with a fresh set of eyes of just like, how should this be done? And who should I be working with? And what, how should this all go? And so in some senses, like I was a little bit insulated from like the odds are so stacked against you and like, all of the kind of negative things that, that you can tell yourself when you're starting a company. But the no's were all kinds of no's. It was no, like, I just don't believe this can, I just don't believe that many women will shop this way. There was a no where it was like, I would come in and I would have a box that was a fix and like a guy looked at it and was like, I just don't understand why anybody would ever want something like this. And like, yeah. I appreciate the honesty. I'm like, okay, great. This doesn't seem like a fit. Like, we'll move on and find somebody who's excited about this. But there were, trying to think what some of the other no's were. The harder no's were the ones that were like, towards their seed stage no's, which are really around like, this is a good idea. Are you the right person to execute it? I don't know. There are, like, the later stage no's are the harder ones. And so, like, the Series B no's of, like, I have a business that is generating millions of dollars. People are waiting 60 or 90 days to get a fix because, like, we don't have the infrastructure to serve, like, the millions of people that this is an attractive proposition for. And, like, I have an amazing team. I have the COO of Walmart.com, who's my COO, and the guy who ran all of algorithms at Netflix, it, like, runs all of algorithms at Stitch Fix. Like, I have an amazing team. The business is working. Clients love it, and they're waiting, like, to get the service. And yet, people were like, I just can't get excited about it.
Yeah.
And like those were really hard because it was like, I knew that I was pitching a female-oriented product to a very male-oriented audience. And so I really and there are some VCs out there that you can ask, and they will tell you that I was the entrepreneur more than anybody they've ever met that knew my numbers inside and out. Like, I knew every number inside and out. I knew every single metric. I knew all, I knew all of this stuff. And so even if I couldn't appeal to like somebody gutturally loving the concept of it, like I wanted to appeal to like the capitalist part and like, you can make a lot of money doing this. And like, it was hard.
Yeah, and even then sometimes, well, and there was a great Bloomberg headline that basically said Stitch Fix has had to do more with less. On top of all of that, you got a little less money, right?
A lot less money.
A lot less money.
This is a company that's doing basically $1 billion in sales in the last 12 months, and we did that with less than $50 million in capital.
Wow. Wow, right? And then I also feel like this would be a great time to point out that when you had your initial public offering, your public photo of the IPO was you with your baby. Not for nothing, there were also babies in this story, and you were on stage with your 1-year-old.
It's, it's an amazing, it's like a very odd time in your life to start a company when I started this when I was in my late 20s. In the 7 years since I started Stitch Fix, I met my husband, I got married, I had a baby, I took a full 16-week maternity leave. Like there's never a good time to do anything, and you could argue this wasn't really a good time to do it. And that picture ended up meaning, so much to me, and I think so much to many people. And it was totally unplanned. The story with the IPO was the 2 weeks leading up to it, you do like a road show and you meet all these investors, and it wasn't going well. And we were gonna price below the range of where we thought we should be able to price. It wasn't, we had this moment where it was this isn't going as planned, and you know what, this feels comfortable. We've been here before. Things have not gone as planned before, and we actually found strength in that and found empowerment in that. And so it was really, to me, feeling F it, this is our IPO, we're gonna do it our way. And I had my son, who at the time was just over a year, was in New York, to be there for it, and I had held him during the dress rehearsal, and he was super chill and happy to be there. So I was like, let's just do this, and he was up there with me the whole time. And it wasn't thoughtfully, strategically planned, but it ended up being important. I have a workforce that we have over 5,000 employees, many of whom are women. Many of our stylists are prioritizing their families to be able to do a more flexible job. It's important because, it's important, of course, there's some themes yesterday around if you can't see it, you can't be it. And it's, it was important because my mom is an immigrant, I'm mixed race. It's important because I, have a child up there. It's important for, little girls and boys to be able to see other examples of what somebody going public looks like. But it's also actually important for the white venture capitalist males who are going to encounter an entrepreneur who's pregnant, or an entrepreneur who's 30 and just got married, and he might think to himself, well, maybe she's gonna have a baby. And it's important even for them to be able to see the example of this is these are achievements that you can have, and at the same time, live the life that you wanna live.
Yeah. And now, Katrina, along the way, you unfortunately encountered what I think so many female and would-be female founders encounter, which is sexual harassment in the VC community that you can't talk about, which is sort of also part of that whole problem, right? That whole toxic ecosystem. But I would like you to talk to us about the choice that becomes part of that. As a founder, the company is the baby too. And so how do you walk that line about how sometimes you have to get through?
Yeah, and like you said, there's nothing specific that I can talk about with that, but my journey as an entrepreneur was not easy. And, I'm so grateful for Time's Up and for Me Too and for the media and for, so much that has happened to create a safer environment for entrepreneurs and an environment that's more inclusive for entrepreneurs.
Do you think that's happening?
I think that at least the worst situations are out there. Like, you know, I think one of my fears is that I think there are probably a lot of still like managers who are doing things that aren't great. And, you know, that there's still, I absolutely don't think that it's eliminated everything, but like, I don't know, like I think that it's net we're better off.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to imagine we could be worse off.
Well, and one of the things we've been talking about a lot, and that has really been a theme in this conference, is using your power once you get it, you know, and how do you become not just a successful CEO, but someone who is influencing the people around you and sometimes saying things that they have never heard before. Like, tell us your hot tub story. I mean, this is just, you know, when you think about culture and how deep some of this stuff goes, you've got sort of a perfect example of being the only woman in the room.
I mean, I couldn't have been the only woman in the room, but I was at a conference that was like actually kind of like this size. It wasn't a huge conference. And there was a VC who was being interviewed Chris Sacca is being interviewed up there. I've already outed his name on there, but Chris Sacca is being interviewed, and he was like, he was saying like, I have a very untraditional approach to VC. Like, I don't even live in the city. I don't even have an office. I live up in Tahoe, and like, you know, I invite entrepreneurs up to my place in Tahoe, and I have them tell me about their company over beers in the hot tub, and I can get to know them, you know, kind of more as humans that way. And I was like sitting in the audience, like literally pregnant. I was like, so, like, you're asking people to come piss you in a swimsuit, and like, I'm literally pregnant, and I actually can't come into your hot tub, and I actually can't drink your beers.
Yeah.
And like, you know, it's like I was in a room with like hundreds of people, and maybe they were all thinking the same thing. I don't know if they were or they weren't, but like it was stated out loud. It wasn't tweeted, it wasn't controversial, and this was, you know, 2 years ago. So, yeah, I think that things like...
But you said something.
I didn't say something at the time.
Well, no, but later to people who were like, oh, I didn't think of it that way.
But I did, and at the time it was so funny because I remember talking to the woman who was doing PR at Stitch Fix, and I was like, I'm so offended. I feel like I should light him up on Twitter. And I literally went through the whole thought process in my head, and I was like, there's like no downside to lighting him up on Twitter. Like, he's gonna tweet storm me. Like, what is the upside in doing this? Yeah. And like, I'm embarrassed that that was true and that I didn't do anything at that moment, but I do think this is where I think change actually has happened, because I do think now it's a little bit of a different time, and like...
Yeah. Well, and now when given your opportunity, you did go after some of your colleagues over, you know, over Uber, right? And that toxic culture.
Yeah, and so, you know, as we segue into the like, now what, and where do we go? Like, I think there are a couple, I don't know, what would I say? So I'll bucket my, should I just segue there?
Yeah, you're doing great. No. You're totally segueing, it's happening.
There's two things that I think are big things that we can all, or that some of us can do. And then there's a bunch of little things that like every single one of us can do every single day. On the two big things, and I'll talk about the Uber thing also, but I think one thing is around using a market-based pay approach. And so that's one thing that we did at Stitch Fix, where it's not perfect. It's still like, you know, there's still imperfections in it. There's still challenges with it. But if you use a market-based pay approach and you're looking at people blindly based on their years of experience and their responsibilities, and you're not looking at who is the squeakiest wheel and who yells the loudest, it's a much better place to start from. So if you're in a position where you can implement that at your company or you can push for it, I would encourage that. There was one other thing we'll talk about the Uber thing. I might have to come back. But so the other, I had one other thing. Well, in the use your voice and your influence topic, like I'm in a place now where I am able to have like a direct line to more people. And so I'll have like a big and small way to talk about this. But I think in the big way, Bill Gurley is an investor in Stitch Fix. He was on the board at Uber for a very long time. And when the whole Uber culture stuff started coming out, like, I was just kind of appalled and horrified, and like, you know, like many of you probably were too, of like, I can't believe this company culture like exists today in 2017. And so I wrote Bill like a strongly worded email. And like in that moment, and what I've realized is like, there are all these decisions that you can make where like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like, the worst thing that can happen is that Bill says like, thank you, I respect your opinion, but I'm good. Like, the worst thing that can happen is nothing. And like, the best thing that can happen, and I wrote in this strongly worded email about how he and I both have this responsibility in the world to create the future, not just of companies, but also of company cultures and where people work and what those companies stand for. And the best thing that could happen was that, I could have been the straw that broke the camel's back that caused Benchmark to do something. And they did something, and Benchmark deserves a lot of credit for kind of what happened from there. And even if you don't have Bill Gurley's ear, there are other small examples of things that I can do. And so, like, for example, when I was pitching to during the roadshow, it was like meeting hedge funds and fund managers and meeting all these like 12 investors at once. And I was in a meeting where it was like 6 people on this side, and there's a young woman who was leading the meeting, and then the partner or whatever was sitting next to her. And he was like, at the very beginning of the meeting, he was like, "All right, sweetie, why don't we get started?" And like, I'm kind of like, did that really happen? Like, are you her dad? Like, and he wasn't.
Right. And just to be clear.
Just to be clear. And like, look, like, I wasn't in a position like where I was going to be able to light him up, and I shouldn't have lit him up. But what I did is after that meeting, I sent her an email. And I was like, "It's such a pleasure to meet you. You are a badass." And like, what's the worst that can happen? Nothing. What's the best that can happen? That like she reminds herself, like, I'm a badass, and like no one's gonna call me sweetie at work, or like I'm gonna start my own hedge fund and I'm gonna make my own $1 billion. Like, there are potentially good things that can happen if you just nudge it a little bit, and I think there are little things that we can all be doing every day. I just remember my second thing too. My second thing. So
we're at 0. Like, is Dylan gonna run out? Okay, go. Okay. I'm gonna give you like 15 seconds. Go.
There's market-based pay. The other thing, we can all do this. So when you RFP, like you're like, okay, I need a new ad agency, or I need an investment bank, or I need a law firm. Many of us are influencers and decision makers in this room, and you send out RFPs and you say, tell me a little bit about like what your capabilities are, what would your strategy be? Ask about gender and diversity metrics. So I asked, when we worked with investment banks, I asked them, what percent of can you share your gender and diversity metrics for your VP and above people in your investment banking division? And look, to be honest, like that wasn't like the main decision criteria, but people had to go and talk to their boss, talk to the head of investment banking. They had to go get the data. Then they had to explain the data and say, like, why is this not what we would hope it is? And what are we doing about it? And so if nothing else, I created conversations in all of these places that maybe would not have happened. And that's something that I think all of us can do in our day-to-day as kind of the decision makers that we are.
Katrina Lake, CEO of Stitch Fix, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sophia Noble and Willow Bay.
Hi, everyone. Great to see you. I was sitting there yesterday and there the night before, and it's been just an incredible experience. So I want to start by, before Sophia and I talk and she shares some of her work with you, I wanted to start by sharing this note that I got from a girlfriend. I don't do slides, I do props. And the note says this. It's a quote from George Bernard Shaw. "The reasonable woman adapts herself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to herself. Therefore, all progress depends upon the unreasonable woman." The note then said, let's all be unreasonable in 2018. I was really struck by this quote and surprised that I'd never heard it before. And then I did a little fact checking. And I realized that my friend, my girlfriend, had intervened just slightly with a little tweak and changed the original wording of the quote, in which it said man, to woman. And it's interesting how much more cultural resonance it has now that she has done that. She wrote women into the story, right? She wrote women into the narrative of progress, and I'd like to thank Megan Smith, who was here on this stage yesterday. She did a story right, as Megan explained to us yesterday. And one of the reasons that that quote resonated so much with me is that at the Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism, we like to think of ourselves as being in the business of teaching, training, and inspiring unreasonable women. We're 70% women's student body, and men. We want them to be unreasonable. We want them to change the world, to adapt the world to them. And one of the ways we think about that in communications is we teach them to be more than power users of all these communication technologies, but instead to be critically conscious consumers and accurate and ethical producers of content. And I'd like to share some exciting news with you. And I'd like to huge thanks to Tim Armstrong and to Makers and Dylan McGee, because they're creating something incredibly unique for us to help us in their mission. The USC Annenberg Makers Fellowship, in which they're gonna offer one of our students after graduation a unique professional experience where they get to spend a year at Makers, working either with their editorial team or with their video production team. So huge thank you to Makers and Oath for offering us that incredible experience and for helping us in our mission. And now to the woman that I'm really excited to introduce you to, for you to hear from, Dr. Sophia Noble. She's a professor at the Annenberg School for Communication. She cares deeply about the knowledge and information that is available to the public. And as you all know, we mostly get that information today online from digital technologies and from search engines. She's also, I have another prop, she's also the author of the just published Algorithms of Oppression, How Search Engines Reinforce Racism, which already, just before publication, has already caused a dust-up, which we'll tell you about in a minute. But you know, she challenges the idea that search engines like Google offer an even playing field for our identities and our activities. So Sophia, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Excited.
So I should point out that Sophia starts all of her lectures, particularly when she first meets new students, with a warning about how you're never going to think about digital technologies and the information that you receive in the same way again. What do you say to them?
It's true. If you are a lover of Google, you are not going to like me after this talk. So just bear with us. It's only 11 more minutes. I guess that's what I've got for you. But I think that you will find that if we just scratch the surface just a little bit with some of the technologies and the platforms that we're using, we'll think about them differently and we can engage with them differently. And that's one of the things that I'm here to kind of talk about with you today.
Well, you got started by scratching the surface.
I did.
Tell us how that began.
I did. So years ago, kind of what prompted this this work was I spent my whole first career for the first 15 years out of college in marketing and advertising. And as I was leaving marketing and advertising and going back to graduate school, Google was really emerging powerfully, and we were starting to shift a lot of our advertising budgets from kind of traditional media to online media buying. And so as I left the industry, I was thinking about Google as an advertising platform because that was the way that we were using it. And then I got to graduate school, and everyone was talking about Google as you know, this kind of public library online. And I was so surprised that people were engaging with it on those terms, knowing it in a different context. And so I started looking into kind of the kinds of identities and ways that Google was representing different forms of knowledge. And this kind of prompted the first really big explosion for me, which was I did a search on the keywords Black girls. At the time, you know, my stepdaughter was a tween, and I was a Black girl at one point in my life, and I was stunned to find that almost all of the content on the first page was pornography.
Go ahead and try it if you want. Seriously.
Yeah, I mean, now, it's been interesting to see over time. We can
pull it up, right?
Everybody's like reaching for their phone on the slide. They're like, I gotta actually check that out. But over time, you know, I've been a big public critic about the ways in which women are stereotyped and misrepresented in search engines. And so Black girls really haven't been as maligned. I mean, the algorithm has changed.
It's interesting, Google changed their search.
I can't take credit for that, but I will say that our voices collectively talking about what's happening in search engines has certainly been impacting the way the industry at large has been starting to think about
So we have
women.
that slide. Can you pull that up?
Okay, so here's the, this is like, I started this in 2009. By 2011, you can see, for those of you in the back, sugaryblackpussy.com is the first hit when you do a keyword search on black girls. Now this is just, with the default settings. And as you go down, I won't read it for you, but this is mostly porn sites that represent black women and girls. And of course, these sites are not children or adolescents. These are women who are doing pornography or porn companies featuring women over 18. And I thought about this in terms of the implications for children and adolescents, and how would they ever be able to recover their identities online? Because as we know, when you think about Google as an advertising platform versus an information retrieval platform, you realize that those who can buy keywords have a lot of influence. And of course, the porn industry has pretty much more money than anybody.
Walk us through another couple of examples.
All right, so then we have, here's another concept. So in the book, I have many, many examples, but here's another one that I thought was interesting. Started thinking about concepts like beautiful. What does it mean that when you look for, and this is a couple of years ago, 14, the keyword beautiful brings back these kind of hegemonic white beauty standards of women. Now, I have to say, when I did this search, and my team collects searches from around the country, we thought we would get nature. I thought it like the beach or an ocean scene, because that's beautiful. And also, I thought of that as a more kind of universal concept that people would attribute to beautiful. I am happy to say that I've said that in a lot of talks, and now if you do a search on beautiful, you do get nature. So I don't know if there's like a direct pipeline from my words to my lips to Google search engineers. I don't think so, but it is interesting to see the shift over time. There you have it from just a couple days ago. All right, it's fine.
Good, progress.
Now, this is one that I think is really fun. This is, I was watching the Grammys one night with a girlfriend on the phone. It's Professor Nerddom. And I thought, oh, I wonder what university professors look like in image search. And of course, here you have the guys. And this is, again, what does it mean for young women, for all women, to think about these different kinds of occupations? I think about teachers all the time. I always tell them, stop telling your students to just Google it, because this is the kind of thing. And what does it mean when they don't see themselves reflected back in these kinds of occupations? And you can do this on a number of occupations and be deeply disturbed. University Dean Willow's not faring much better for you. Sorry, we got to get Willow up here on the first page.
And so here's the thing, if I'm doing my job right, as you all know, this is what a dean and a professor looks like, but if I'm really good, that's what a dean looks like next.
Oh, thanks. Thanks.
So we're now in a different era where we have a sense of urgency, right?
Yes.
About when we look at what's gone on online, right? Russian bots taking over our election, interfering with our democracy. So there's a fair sense of urgency around questioning the accuracy of what we see online, but should we also be questioning its neutrality?
Absolutely. It's a farce to think that we're going to find neutral and objective information. I don't think it exists. I think there are many perspectives, and what we want to try to surface are perspectives that are based on evidence, that are based on knowledge, that are based on inquiry, not that are kind of a gamification with misinformation and disinformation. And that is certainly the kind of thing that we're seeing. I'm sympathetic to tech companies and the people who work there, because I used to work in corporate America for a long time. Really good people work in these companies, and these are very complex, difficult problems to solve. But when we see the divestment in public information and education, we see the erosion of funding for public schools, for public libraries. People are reliant upon these private companies in the tech sector. And they have an obligation back to the public, in my opinion, or we have to demand greater investment in public, non-commercial information spaces.
So the theme of this conference is Raise Your Voice. You're sitting in front of this room filled with executives, technologists, creators, and makers. What is our collective social responsibility at ensuring that our public information is what we want it to be? What's our call to action? What should we be doing?
I think that we should keep partnership and pressure on tech corridors, Silicon Valley, Silicon Beach, and so forth. I think that we can also have greater investment in public alternatives. And that might mean that the corporate sector is donating and investing in. I mean, I'm certainly working with my collaborators on thinking about what a public interest, non-commercial search engine would look like and how that might be curated by, say, academic librarians and public librarians and people who are kind of in the knowledge business, so to speak. Everybody who claps, you should just call me. So the idea that we don't have to have either or. I mean, I use Google. I used it this morning to find directions to get here. For kind of banal information, it's fantastic. It really does help us sort through the trash that's online. But for more nuanced kinds of information that are about concepts, some knowledge, of course, we know we work in a university. Their knowledge is contested all the time. This is why we do research. This is why we try to have deep study. There are some questions that can't be answered in 0.03 seconds. And so this is why we need to think about other kinds of arenas for knowledge. And I think it's fundamental to democracy. It's certainly fundamental to people who are already living in the margin. For women, I mean, you see at very basic levels, we're misrepresented. Imagine what happens when you start thinking about women's knowledge and the other kinds of things that we're creating.
We have a quick minute left. You sort of made news. Sophia's book comes out, and immediately somebody from the Association of Electrical Engineers, the IEEE, reads a marketing blurb and sends out a critique, shall we say, in a tweet without having read the book. And what happens next?
So I gotta tell you, I love women because the Twitterati came. It's interesting. I mean, they came for him. And, you know, you can't just take down women's knowledge and our scholarship and our labor that's in the service of women with, you know, a flippant kind of tweet. And so he apologized publicly on Twitter. And lots of people are ordering the book in solidarity, and I'm grateful for that. And of course, you can find me online at Sophia Noble, and you can follow the drama as it unfolds.
Great. Sophia, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Great to meet you all.
Appreciate it.
Study after study has shown that women are less aggressive than men when it comes to investing.
We systematically underestimate our own abilities in terms of making decisions.
The U.S. has a retirement savings shortfall of $13 trillion. Not million, not billion, trillion. And newsflash, ladies, it's a woman's crisis. I know, I can hear you. I can hear you hyperventilating out there. The good news, we can fix this for ourselves. I'm Sallie Krawcheck, CEO of Ellevest, the investing platform for women. Cheers.
Cheers.
And welcome.
Absolutely.
This little
Thank you
rosé
for
because
having me.
it's summer here. The guys just invest. But we women, we wait till we know everything, which is never.
My company has a matching plan to match 25% of whatever I invest. I'm just not sure if I should invest with a company or by myself.
If you can get a 25% company matching, you want to do that every time.
Is it really, really, really terrible to want security?
Never, ever, ever have I seen a company rescind a job offer because you asked for more money. You don't want to leave that money on the table. Nobody out there has a man as a plan anymore, do they? That was sort of my mom's generation.
It would be slick if we had an electric ironer, like Sally's mother has.
Want to be equal with men? Well, we're not getting there until we're financially equal with men. And they're investing, and we aren't. Boom.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sallie Krawcheck.
Good morning, how are you? All right, I want to let you in on a secret. Money is power. Money is confidence. Money is independence. Money is taking care of our families. Money is starting our businesses. Money is take this job and shove it. Money is time's up. Recently at Ellevest, my digital investing platform for women, we talked to 1,000 women and 1,000 men and asked the women, what is the thing that makes you feel most confident about achieving your goals in life? It was not what some of the media would make us think. It's not our shiny hair. It's not the fact that we're wearing this season's new boots, though we are. It's actually not a lot of things we would think. It's not what's going on in Washington. It's not the support we get from our families. It's not even the salary we're earning at work or the esteem with which our boss holds us. The number one thing that gives us confidence in reaching our goals in life is how much money we have saved, how much money we have invested, and the very act of investing and saving. Conversely, the number one source of stress for women today is money. And women can lose up to 2 weeks a year in productivity at work through presenteeism, worrying about money. Now, the truth is, the guys have more money than we do, by some good measure. And we've heard a lot over the course of the past couple of days. We've heard about the gender pay gap, which is a cause of it. We've heard a little bit about the gender work achievement gap, the gender unpaid labor gap. There's a gender debt gap. And a couple that we don't talk enough about, but which is why I founded Ellevest and which is my life's mission. We have a gender savings gap and a gender investing gap. And these can cost us a ton. All right, now, the good news is that society, and by society I mean the patriarchy, lets us know why it's our fault that we're not saving and investing enough. So they're very helpful to us. One thing they tell us, super helpful, is society lets us know that just men are just better at math than women are. Not true. First of all, we get better grades than the guys in every subject at school, and in math, sometimes we get the same. But it's not that they're better at math and math-like things, or tech and tech-like things than we are. Society tells us they're better investors than we are. Not true. When women invest, we tend to outperform the guys, be that as a professional hedge fund manager, mutual fund manager, or individual investor. You know the articles you read about how individuals, people, investors fall in love with their winners, wait too long to sell the losers, pay too much in fees, panic during the up and down markets of the past few days, right? How investors do that. We need to change the title of all of those articles to not mistakes investors make, but mistakes male investors make. Because the mistake we tend to make is we don't invest enough. Women are more risk averse than men. You've heard that before, right? There's something about having a uterus inside our body that does not allow us to take on risk, so we don't invest. It's perfectly clear. Wrong. We're not more risk averse, we're more risk aware. And so while the men in our lives whom we adore will hear alpha and they're like, I want some of that. And standard deviation, I want some of that too, don't I? We women, because I know everybody here got their A's at school, want to understand more about investing, want to understand those terms before we do. Once we invest, we don't take on any less risk than the guys do. Not investing is more certain. Sort of. You know what's certain? If you keep your money in cash, you lose ground every day to inflation. but that if you invest even with the markets of the past few days, even back to the 20s, 30s, from the 1920s, the annual return in investing in the equity markets is 9.5% annually. A diversified investment portfolio, 6%. These are life-changing numbers. The other, women love everything about Wall Street. It must work for them. That outperforming thing, the buying the winners, the winning, right? That feels like us, right? CNBC, we love them. They're like ESPN. That feels like us, right? The fact that financial advisors, 86% male, mostly white men, that feels like us, right? Now, I have nothing against middle-aged white guys. I've been married to a couple of them. They are amazing creatures. My husband's the whitest man I know. Amazing creatures, but it doesn't look like us. And the industry symbol is an anatomically correct bull. It's a phallic symbol, all right? Not a woman I know says, that bull just speaks to me. It hasn't been built for us. All right, let's move from a little myth-busting to a little call. I'm gonna give you an answer, and you're gonna give me the question. Okay, so a little game just to liven things up. First one, let's see who can get this. 6 to 8 years and 80%. Okay, y'all are not very good at this. Here's the answer. How much longer do women live than men? And what percent of women die single? We live 6 to 8 years longer than our male friends, and 80% of us die single. Look at any nursing home. 2/3. Okay, I'll give you the answer again. 2/3 is the percent of wealth versus men that we retire with. Put another way, we retire with 2/3 the money of men, less, and quite a bit less if you're a woman of color. We live longer, we retire with less. 90%. The percent of women who manage their money on their own at some point in their lives, whether they want to or not. A decade. Y'all are the worst. A decade. This is how much sooner our salaries peak than men's do. Our salaries on average peak in our 40s, and for men, it's in their 50s. More than $1 million. This is how much the gender investing gap can cost the women in this room. For those who are watching, for some of you, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. For some of you, it's millions of dollars. It's a fortune. It's a life-changing amount of money. $100 a day. For those of you who don't like big numbers, I'm sharing with you a small number. This is the amount of money we lose a day if we're making, let's call it $85,000 a year, putting aside 20%, as the experts tell you do annually. We put it in a bank account rather than invest it. We wait 10 years to invest, which isn't off by much. We can lose $100 a day. Let me ask you a question, ma'am. If you were to have a hole in your purse and you were to leave here today and $100 fell out of it, and the next day another 100, and the next day another 100, how many days would it take you to fix your purse? Probably one day. Sex. Come on, you gotta have the answer for this one. Sex. The thing we talk to our girlfriends about more than we talk about money. The thing we have with a potential partner well before we ever talk to them about money. Society has allowed us to talk about sex, but not about money. By the way, imagine, well, what date do you have sex these days? I've been married for so long. Like second, third? Third, sir? Second? All right, thanks. All right, that guy's like one, right? Imagine if on the second or third date, rather than getting cozy, all of a sudden we were saying, let's take out our balance sheets. There would not be a next date. So society tells us, the patriarchy tells us, almost as if they meant to keep us away from money, that talking about money is crass and unattractive. This is like 1950s June and Beaver Cleaver. Don't talk about money. Well, guys, how do we know what raise to ask for? How do we know how to invest? if society tells us not to talk about money. And so what you saw before is we're working to change that. We're working to break through the myths. We're working to drop some truth bombs. We're working to give advice. And I promise we're working to make it interesting and fun and engaging. I'm partnering, Ellevest is partnering with our friends here at Makers, with our friends at Yahoo Finance to bring you Makers Money. And in Makers Money, we're gonna have some badass guests, Lavia Jaya being one of them, so badass. And we're gonna be talking about how we can have more money. It starts tomorrow. It's gonna be Thursdays, 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time, and every Thursday from here on. And I would ask all of you, please, to pour yourself a wine. We're doing it in the early evening on the East Coast time. Bring a friend. Start the conversation about money and continue the conversation about money. Share the episodes with other women, because it's gonna be targeted at women in our unique needs, with younger women in your life. And send any questions you have to me at Sallie@makers.com. And share using the hashtag MakersMoney. The other thing I would say, Ellevest, it is my life's mission to close the gender investing gap. If you are not investing enough, please go to ellevest.com/makers, where I've got a little present for you, including a free investment plan, but an even other good present to give you back some of those days where you haven't been investing. We are super excited because, ladies, money is power, and it's time to level the playing field. Thank you.
How cute is Sarah's baby? Oh, adorable, those tiny toes. How cute is she gonna be with a pedicure with itty bitty little dots of nail polish? Do you know what makes me jealous? Babies don't give a fuck. Literally, they have zero fucks to give. They will take a shit anywhere. In a restaurant with a hot guy in the room, in a new place. I wish I could be that free.
Okay, don't judge me for saying this, but doesn't it feel like babies are a little holier than thou? Like, I met one the other day in the 98th percentile for height, and it had really gone to her head.
I love babies. I mean, don't get me wrong, but...
No, they're totally in it for themselves, right?
Yes! It does feel a little one-sided, a little bit.
I know, it's like, I'm making sure that you're getting your Cheerios every morning, and it just doesn't go both ways.
No, I could be wearing an amazing necklace, and the baby will just straight up shove it in his mouth.
I know, it's like, have some respect. As adults, we're always treating them to stuff. And I know, you don't have an income or fully developed neck muscles.
But it's the thought that counts. You could, you could at least reach for the check.
Exactly.
Yeah. And every time I take them to a restaurant, they are so loud. I'm like, babies, you are making a spectacle. Look around you. Be conscious.
It's like, I know you only know 2 words, but that doesn't mean we can't have an intelligent discussion about feminism.
Right? Let's just say it. Babies can't dance. They're waving themselves around. It's like, baby, you can't dance. You're a fat little drunk.
Wasted.
I love my babies. It's just they're so full of shit. I mean, literal shit. They poop a lot.
And they can go through up to 12 diapers a day.
I'm kind of jealous of how regular they are.
And it's not like you can pawn them off to a daycare and let them diaper them up for you.
Oh, hell no. They turn you away at daycare if you don't BYOD.
Julie, it's BYOB.
Oh, no. Daycare is like a bad house party. BYOD, bring your own diapers.
And diapers are expensive. They cost $70 to $80 per month. And it's not like the government is helping you out with that.
You're not getting assistance from babies either.
I know, it's like, oh, let me guess, you forgot your wallet, babies? Or you don't have a Venmo account? It's like, why don't you just say you're not gonna pay me back to my face?
Right, baby. You don't understand the concept of money. It's called capitalism. Get with it.
Yeah, get it together, babies.
And you're embarrassing yourselves.
Ladies and gentlemen, Nicole Richie, Kelly Sawyer-Patrikoff, and Nora Weinstein.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, I'm Nicole Richie, and I am a Baby to Baby board member. Baby to Baby is a nonprofit that provides low-income children ages 0 through 12 with diapers, clothing, and all of the basic necessities that every child deserves. Over the past 6 years, we've distributed 34 million items to children in need, including more than 20 million diapers. Can you believe that mothers are choosing between diapers and food? Diapers are literally causing a cycle of poverty, and that's why we're talking about diapers today. So let me turn it over to these two diaper queens, Kelly Sawyer-Patrikoff and Nora Weinstein. And they're gonna tell you why it's hashtag more than a diaper.
Sure. So, Baby to Baby distributes everything a child needs, from cribs to car seats, strollers, blankets, bottles, backpacks, school supplies. But when we ask a mom, a dad, or a social worker what they need most, there's one item that tops every list every time, and it's diapers. They are truly like gold to the families we serve.
Gold, and why is that so important, Kelly?
It's because babies need so many of them, up to 12 per day. It's because they're expensive, $70 to $80 per month per baby. Think about that math when you have multiple kids.
It's also because poor families are paying 2 times as much as wealthier families for diapers. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, they just don't have the extra funds to buy in bulk.
A study last year actually showed that the 4 things low-income families are spending the most money on each month are food, heat, rent, and diapers.
So we keep talking about how families don't have enough diapers. So what are families doing about that?
Families are literally emptying out their baby's diaper, hanging it to dry, and then putting it back on their baby. That's how bad it is.
It's unfathomable.
You might be asking why these families don't just use cloth diapers, but we want to put that suggestion to rest today. The low-income families who Baby to Baby work with do not have washing machines in their homes, and that's if they have homes at all. And laundromats are certainly not particularly welcoming to women coming with bags of dirty diapers to wash them there.
So is that BYOD thing really true?
It's shockingly true. Parents have to bring a full day supply of diapers, which is about 6 to 8, in order to drop off their child at daycare or preschool. If you don't have that requisite number of diapers, your child cannot stay.
It's even worse than that. Not only does the child lose that opportunity to jumpstart their early education, but the parents can't go back to work, they can't go to a job interview because they can't drop off their kids. So let's face it, we know the overwhelming majority are the moms.
So these low-income parents are forced to stay at home instead of working. It might look like just a diaper, but it's more than a diaper. Diapers translate into opportunities. So let's talk about government assistance. Is there any at all for the diapers?
No, food stamps don't even cover diapers. And even worse than that, there are still 38 states that charge sales tax on diapers. They are taxing diapers the same way they're taxing a luxury item. And I know everyone in this room doesn't think there's anything luxurious about a diaper.
So diapers have the same tax as tequila.
Exactly. We've personally testified in Sacramento to remove sales tax from diapers, and we lost 2 times.
That's unbelievable. So how can we change that?
Well, we're gonna try again this year.
We'll be back.
Okay, let me switch subjects for a second. Kelly, can you tell us about how Baby to Baby has been involved with the disaster relief efforts over the past year?
Yes. When Houston was devastated by Hurricane Harvey, the first thing we did was we sent over 1 million diapers to the relief efforts. Because when your baby doesn't have diapers, you can't do anything else. You can't go to work, you can't take your child to daycare, and you certainly can't file an insurance claim to rebuild your house. You first need to help your baby with their most basic needs.
We flew to Houston and spent time in the shelters and can tell you firsthand, these families were desperate for diapers. And it was the same story when the hurricane then hit Florida and then Puerto Rico. And then just this last month with the terrible fires across California, the families come to us for diapers first.
I'm so proud that Baby to Baby has sent over 4 million basic essentials to the children affected by all of the recent disasters. Let's talk about some people who've helped make this happen.
We have this great group of women behind Baby to Baby. We call them our angels. There's you, of course.
That's right.
And Julie Bowen, Kerry Washington, Jessica Alba, Kelly Rowland, Drew Barrymore, Gwyneth Paltrow, the list goes on and on.
And our angels are how we get donations of diapers. We've tried to flip corporate sponsorships on their head a little bit. So when Huggies calls us and asks if they can get a celebrity host for an event, we ask, well, that depends how many diapers you can give us.
So that's why you're always making me pose with Huggies diapers.
Yes.
Okay, I thought you were trying to give me a hint.
No. To date, because of you and this phenomenal group of women we have behind us, Huggies has donated over 11.6 million diapers to the low-income families in our program.
And another great day at Baby to Baby was when the Honest Company's strawberry toothpaste accidentally came out tasting too much like raspberry. They donated 23,000 tubes of it to us. They couldn't sell it, and of course, our families were delighted to have it, so it was a win-win.
And yes, and even though the conversation is about diapers, we can actually do the same thing with sneakers, backpacks, hygiene products, cribs, toys, and warm coats, right?
Yeah, so this is what we're gonna ask of you today. If you run a company, work at a company that makes diapers or other basic essentials, please consider donating product to us. If you have an e-commerce site, please offer free shipping or discounted pricing to nonprofits. Also for us, Baby to Baby's social media is how we garner diaper donations and donations of the other items that we give to our low-income families. So follow us on social media, like our photos, retweet our tweets. We do a lot of social media campaigns around diapers and other basic essentials.
And let's insist that diapers are always available to new moms. As female business leaders in this room, we want to make sure that there's not a single low-income woman missing work because of diapers.
So today, we're asking all of you who leave here to leave here and do something about it. This is a serious crisis in our country. It truly is #MoreThanADiaper. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Lisa McCarthy.
Good morning. I'm pinching myself to be here. It's my second year at Makers, and if you're anything like me, on day 3, you're saying to yourself, I am so moved and inspired by women as young as 12 and as old as 96, and men. So thrilled to have men at Makers this year, but all of the people taking a stand for equality and safety in our workplace and in our world. And you're also, you may be daunted and slightly intimidated. Anyone? How, am I going to apply this to my life? I have the privilege of being here. I have the privilege of watching. How am I going to raise my voice? How am I going to drive change and take a stand? And for some of you, how am I going to change my circumstances and fuel my own happiness? Anyone thinking that? So that's why I'm here. Because the exercise I'm going to share with you today has changed for over 10,000 people how they work, live, lead, and love. And it will require vulnerability, which I know is a major theme of the conference, and it will require courage. So don't anyone leave. Before I give you the exercise, I'm gonna share my story. 12 years ago, even though I look 40, I was 38, and I was living in Long Island, where I live, with my husband, Sean, who's a police chief, and we had 3 young children. And I had a big job at a media company. and I registered for a leadership program because I was feeling like I needed to ignite myself. And the pre-work for the leadership program was to write your eulogy. So they told us to interview people at work, interview people at home, interview our friends, and it was a life-changing and extremely disturbing experience. The reason for that is that I had to own up to I was known for being really busy. And the reason I was known for being really busy is that I walked about 100 miles an hour through the hallway at work. If I asked someone how they were, I didn't stop and kept moving. And if someone asked me, Lisa, how are you? I would say in an extremely intense, high-strung way, I'm really busy. And for some of those lucky people, and this is embarrassing to admit, I would actually tell them everything I was really busy with as if it was remotely interesting to anyone except my sister. Maybe my sister, okay? So here I am in this seminar, and I'm thinking, like, this is not okay. I cannot have this as my tombstone. And I took time, and I wrote my eulogy. And as you know, with the eulogy, it's already happened. So I literally imagined my children at my funeral getting up and saying, my mother was present, connected, she was the glue of our family. She took care of us. She was our greatest fan and a meaningful coach. As a wife, she was present, she was loving, she was connected. As a friend, she was amazing, always there. And in the workplace, she made a difference. She led change and she took a stand for helping people have cultures where their whole lives are ignited, where you can produce extraordinary results at work and in anything you're committed to. And that was the easy part. The hard part was sharing it. So I went home, I shared it with my family. My husband, who loves me, said, we'll see. And then, and my kids were very young at that time. And I shared it with my team at work. And the reason I shared it with my team at work and with my family is because I knew that this would require radical change in behavior. So I needed to come out and tell people so that they would hold me accountable and let me know when I was not being that. Now, who can relate to what I'm saying, by the way? Who's running around saying you're busy, tired, stressed? Stop doing that. So I go back into my real life, and I just practiced. All I did was practice. I was intentional, and I practiced being the person that was in my eulogy, and I am still practicing. Some days go better than others, but I'm living that life, that future that I'm committed to, so that, you know, my kids actually say that at my funeral. And today, I'm proud to share that when people say, Lisa, how are you? I say, I'm overly fulfilled. Fast forward, feel free to use that. Fast forward, I'm 45 years old, and I'm at a crossroads in my career. I am leaving the media company that I'm at, and I can either go to another big media company and run a team, huge opportunity, or I can pursue my dream to create a company that helps other leaders experience what I did and get conscious of how they show up and how they lead and how they coach, and creating a culture where people can win and succeed in all areas of their life. And with a ton of excitement, but more fear, I chose the dream. I reached out to my childhood friend, Wendy Letchgold, who's here with me in the audience, and we met in camp. And she has other qualifications, but I reached out to her, and I said, Wendy, I know if I do this myself, it'll be done in 90 days, because I need energy, I need people, I need discipline. And together, we wrote down a vision for the Fast Forward Group. And we wrote it as if it had already happened. I mean, it was vivid, it was specific, it was, this is our mission, this is the impact we're having, these are our clients, this is what they're saying, this is how it feels coming to work every day. And we had no idea how to do it. But we wrote it down, we believed it, we could see it, and we started sharing it with people. And guess what? People got excited. Jackie Kelly from Bloomberg said, I'm gonna give you my conference room and you can beta, fast forward with all your industry friends and we'll give you feedback. Carolyn Everson from Facebook said, we're gonna be your first client. And she subsequently scaled it to her entire organization of 3,000 people and now is bringing it to her clients. And then we have a ton of makers companies. Just a big shout out to all the makers companies that are investing in people and culture, men and women, because we all want the same thing. We all want the same kind of life. So now I'm gonna share a piece of our work so that you leave here in action, that you leave here with an actionable way to apply all this inspiration to your life. Everybody ready? Because this is gonna be interactive. We always create work. Okay, so you're fast forwarding a year from today, and you are gonna look in your own life at this question. What does extraordinary success look like for you? The first question you're gonna ask, and you're gonna write this down in a moment, is write down one important and unpredictable outcome, and write it as if you already accomplished it. Let me say what we mean by unpredictable. You could fail, you don't know how to do it, or you don't know the full plan, or it's going to require people and factors outside of your control. Let me share some examples. Number one, and you need to say it when you say it with conviction. I took on a new leadership role at my company, increased my comp by 20%, and I am lit up by work. Two, we have an inclusive company culture. This year was a game changer. We have improved leadership numbers by 20% for women and people of color. Three, I feel healthy for the first time in years. I am taking care of my mental and physical well-being. And four, I am in a fulfilling, loving relationship. This is for those of you that are single and those of you that have a partner but stop paying attention. Okay, 30 seconds, you need to write down. Everybody, let's go, okay? You have to write down, or you could type it in your phone, but nobody sell out. I'm giving you 30 seconds to write down one important and unpredictable outcome and write it as if it's already happened. Please begin. Make it specific. If you can, make it measurable. Okay, so here comes the courageous part. You are going to turn to the person next to you. I told you, vulnerability, courageousness. Don't insert something else now, okay? You're gonna share with the person next to you, it's February 2019, here's what happened. And then say why it's important. And this is about 30 seconds each. It's gonna get extremely loud, and then I'm gonna ring a yoga chime. Everybody ready? Let's go, please begin. Share with one other person. Okay, that time it worked. Okay, who is inspired? Raise your hand by saying it out loud. Who's uncomfortable? This exercise is about bringing intention and choosing to be uncomfortable in all areas of your life. I consider that a good thing because for any of you that have chosen comfort, what is the cost? Stagnation and it's boring. It's boring. If you want to be lit up and you got to be uncomfortable. So I consider that a good thing. Okay, next question. Everybody ready? 1 year from today, I'm giving you a whole year. What are you, hopefully it'll happen sooner. What are you known for? Okay, here are some examples, and then you're gonna write it down for yourself. 1, I am a present and interested parent and partner. 2, I am an inspiring leader who drives growth and cares about people. 3, I speak my voice and I have the hard conversations. 4, I am taking a stand for what I believe in. Now it's your turn. 30 seconds, write it down. And write it down as if it's already happened. Happening, I am. Pick the one that's going to require change or courage. Okay, next step. You know what it is. You're gonna share with the same person. Say it with confidence and conviction. You do not need to know how. You will figure it out. Please begin. Is that good? You win all 3. Shh. Who's inspired? Yeah. So now your job is to go home and tell the people that surround you so you can be supported and hold yourself accountable. Anything is possible if you set an intention and then you practice. We're all ordinary people that can make an extraordinary difference, and we can be who we want to be if we set an intention and practice. Okay, last thing. You now have a taste of our Fast Forward Vision exercise. In order to get coaching to do the entire exercise, go to our website. When you get home, go to our website, and you're going to get everything you need, and you can email us to get vision samples. Over 10,000 people have done this exercise. It is making an extraordinary difference, and it could be that for you. Make this your year. Raise your voice. Raise your voice. And if you have an area of your life or your company and you're thinking to yourself, this is so not right, somebody needs to do something, be that somebody. Like, be the change, make the difference, set an intention, write it in your vision, share it out loud. You will figure it out. It will compel you to find a way, get support, galvanize people, and have this be your year. Last thing, we have a workshop today, 12 to 1 in the screening room. So for any of you that are interested in getting help managing your inner critic, which is often the thing that gets in the way of bold visions, join Wendy and I in the screening room from 12 to 1. Thank you. Do this, and it was a privilege.
Ladies and gentlemen, there will now be a short break. Please return back to Studio A at 10:30.
In China, delegates at the United Nations Women's Conference are getting down to business. In the suburb of Huairou, some 30 miles north of Beijing, activists are congregated for a non-government organization, or NGO, forum.
When I got there to the Huairou, it's just so different. You don't see that this is China. You feel like you're in abroad, maybe, or you're in New York. You see the women with all kind of national costume, with all different color of skin, speaking different language. And everything for me is so interesting, so exciting.
It was the first time that literally women from every part of the globe came together, got to know each other, got to hear each other.
There were women from all walks of life. We had school teachers. We had the group of accountants. You know, there were disabled women. There were large numbers of Catholic nuns.
We had 300 women from Brazil. We went with indigenous, with sex workers, with rural farmers, leaders, you know, campesinas, all kinds of very grassroots women.
In Huairou, Iranian women with the black chador, they were everywhere, just walking, no events, no talking. Even they didn't know about the English language. But the plan was to show to the cameras that we are here.
What I remember most is the fire that was there in Huairou. To look closely at what is happening in Zimbabwe. What about in Mozambique? What about Nigeria? How are women treated? What would you think needs to change? We spent all day and we forged partnerships.
Every region had a tent. It was amazing because there was so much hope and energy. There was a lot of celebration, but there was a lot of content, a lot of honoring the hurdles that women were facing.
We were talking and sharing, discussing and debating what is important, what should be taken to negotiations in Beijing.
There's a woman who spent hours and hours in the tent to discuss about those issues that sounds, for me, very far away.
I remember was the first time that I hear about traffic of women, you know, was the first time that I hear about rape as, you know, a mechanism of war.
To hear about things like female genital mutilation for the first time in my life, learning about, you know, Korean comfort women, it was just astounding for me. And I had never heard these stories before, and I felt like these are the stories that need to get out.
There's the sheer solidarity of seeing 30,000 women in kente cloth and blue jeans and saris and turbans and you name it, coming together, laughing, angry for all the right reasons, demonstrating, plotting strategy. The energy is quite magical. It makes you part of something that you realize is unstoppable. But at the same time, being in Huairou was a bit of a nightmare.
These first days in Huairou were not easy to live. No windows, difficulties with water, bathrooms without doors, no locks, and well.
We were in these little tiny rooms, one bed and 2 bunk beds.
You know, the beds were very bad, very bad, very bad. Looks like it was broken when we sleep on that. No elevators at all. Another thing that really annoys the Brazilians, where's the bar? Where's the party? Where we will party?
With the many thousands of people coming in, you have to have hotels and infrastructure, meeting rooms. It's a large challenge for any country, you know, to find the way.
I remember they had this little kind of bulletin board, and it said, I'm sorry things are not going well. I'm sorry that, the showers are cold. Everything was, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
The presence of thousands of strong-willed, outspoken foreign women has the Chinese on edge. Predictably, they're keeping a tight rein with stepped-up security and surveillance, which critics say is totally inappropriate for an event based on the free flow of ideas.
We're being followed, taped, and filmed almost from the moment we leave our hotels until the moment we return at night.
There was a lot of security. They have people like watching around.
Rooms were searched, papers were taken.
When I got back to my room, they had gone through my suitcase and my roommate's suitcase.
I mean, people talked about going out for a morning run at the wrong time, suddenly being sort of not just followed, but just sort of surrounded and stopped, get back to your hotel. There was surveillance, there was control. They were trying very hard to do it with a light touch. To us, it was like a hammer.
The controversy escalates there just as Hillary Rodham Clinton heads to Beijing.
It will become an even bigger issue once the UN conference begins and First Lady Hillary Clinton arrives.
We were briefed on the plane going in to expect that we were all going to be observed and what to look for in terms of, cameras or microphones in our hotel rooms. And we were told, in the bathroom, run the shower, steam up the shower, and look at the mirror. And if there's a part of the mirror that is not foggy, that's where the camera is, and then just tack a towel over it.
We got to our hotel in Beijing, and the next morning, I said to one of my aides who had come in to kind of get ready for the day, I said, I would love to see how the English language papers are covering this in China, so I have some idea what they're saying. She goes, oh, well, we can get you a paper. Literally within minutes, there was a knock on the door and a paper delivered. I will never forget that. Jokingly after that, we would, look at the television screen or the mirror in the bathroom and say, pizza, milkshake, want to get any room service here? We had some fun with it. Like, oh, I'm so hungry. French fries would be good today. But anyway, we were well aware that there was a lot of anxiety on the part of the Chinese government.
White House officials say that Mrs. Clinton will not directly confront China on its record of human rights abuses.
Mrs. Clinton is likely to disappoint those who want her to bash China publicly over its human rights record.
There were definitely hopes that she would not rock the boat, that she would be just kind of neutral and not really do anything that gets too much attention. There were people who were kind of tamping down expectations and hoping that that result would be a kind of, bland and unmemorable speech.
The First Lady will speak out on ways to improve the lives of women, children, and families, and leave any direct criticism of China to the diplomats.
Going in, we were told to expect, quote, First Lady speech, soft power, but not an aggressive, in-your-face human rights statement. There was no expectation of that. We didn't even think it was going to be, terribly newsy.
Hi, everybody. How are you? Anybody getting sleep? Not much. Not much. Maybe tonight. I don't know. We'll see.
A friend of mine had given me a suit. And she said, if you're going to go make this speech, wear this pink suit. And at first I thought it was a little, too much in your face, but then I thought, why not, right? So I wore this pink suit. I was jet lagged and I was nervous and I was anxious. Went into the hall.
We could not get in. I remember we were pushing, shoving. We could not get in, but at least there was the big screen.
Any television screen or monitor anywhere in the facility was packed with people around it.
The First Lady of the United States, Hillary Clinton.
I remember being really nervous because of what it had been like to get to that point, and pray God that everything went well.
I would like to thank the Secretary General for inviting me to be part of this important United Nations Fourth World Conference on Women.
I was nervous. I was apprehensive because I thought there was a lot riding on one speech, because the people in the room where the speech were the people who were the delegates that were going to determine ultimately what we voted on for the platform for action. And people were, behind their placards announcing their nation.
By gathering in Beijing, we are focusing world attention on issues that matter most in our lives, the lives of women and their families.
She starts the speech, and it feels like an eternity that they sit there in stony-faced silence, completely unresponsive, kind of like statues. And Milan and I look at each other like, oh my God, what have we gotten wrong?
What we are learning around the world is that if women are healthy and educated, their families will flourish.
I was aware that my speech would have to be translated into many different languages. But that throws the speaker off unless you're really experienced. And at that time, I wasn't that experienced because you don't get any reaction because everybody's waiting to hear what is actually being said. And sort of looking at the crowd, I was seeing nothing. Just people with their headphones listening intently. I thought, oh boy, okay, I've insulted half the crowd and I have to forge ahead. So I kept going.
But the voices of this conference and of the women at YRO must be heard loudly and clearly. It is a violation of human rights when babies are denied food or drowned or suffocated or their spines broken simply because they are born girls.
And then she got to this place where she went through this listing of horrific actions against women.
It is a violation of human rights when women and girls are sold into the slavery of prostitution for human greed, and the kinds of reasons that are used to justify this practice should no longer be tolerated.
I think people were like, whoa, she's actually talking about this stuff.
It is a violation of human rights.
She is not holding back.
Set on fire and burned to death.
It was affirming what women have been saying all along.
It is a violation of human rights when a leading cause of death worldwide among women ages 14 to 44 is the violence they are subjected to in their own homes by their own relatives.
And each one was more surprising than the next.
It is a violation of human rights when young girls are brutalized by the painful and degrading practice of genital mutilation.
As she would list these things, you could see they were touching various delegations in the audience because they would rise to their feet and pound the table in front of them.
And the last one she saved for the end was forced abortion and forced sterilization. Everyone in that room understood that she was speaking about China.
It is a violation of human rights when women are denied the right to plan their own families, and that includes being forced to have abortions or being sterilized against their will.
That was shattering.
If there is one message that echoes forth from this conference, let it be that human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights once and for all.
It was like the ether changed. There was a paradigm shift. You could feel it in the air. And the idea that our rights are not peripheral side issues, but fundamental human issues, human rights issues, was totally new and revolutionary.
She made the point that women's issue was not just women's issue, it's a human issue. It's an idea which should always be there.
I heard the courage in the speech. We're in China, 1995. speaking about human rights. And the most important phrase, human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights. I think this sums it up, the whole conference.
The fact that the First Lady said it mattered to women, that was big for us.
And I remember a lot of debate that week, people saying, that's huge. I mean, that's too much. How can women's rights be human rights? What is she talking about?
A forceful and uncompromising speech at the Beijing Women's Conference.
A blast at governments and cultures that violate the human rights of women.
The First Lady's human rights bombshell was unexpected and risky.
There were other parts of the speech that we expected to draw more attention because women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights once and for all seemed like a very obvious thing to say. But I wanted to say it because I didn't want there to continue to be this divide. Like, okay, you can be passionate about human rights and then, okay, you can say something nice about women. No. So we kept it in, and luckily, it did catch the imagination.
Aloha! 4 years later, women, once seen as little more than extensions of their husbands' political careers, were running for office in record numbers.
When I started my campaign, I was so low in the polls that I wasn't even a blip on the radar. I had a meeting with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand here in DC. She asked, "Why are you running for Congress? What do you want to do here?" And after we talked for a few minutes, she said, "All right, I want to help you. We're going to get you elected to Congress so that we can work together and get some things done."
Tulsi Gabbard, an Iraq War veteran from Honolulu, was elected to the House of Representatives for the first time, along with 18 other freshman women. In the Senate, 5 new women were elected. Never before had so many women served in Congress.
20 women in the United States Senate, 20%. To go from 2% to 20%. In my lifetime in this institution, I felt it was like landing on the moon or being the first to going into outer space. We broke records, we broke barriers, and it was very clear to me, we're here to stay, and these numbers will increase.
The 5 new women senators joined a tradition started in 1994 by Barbara Mikulski and Kay Bailey Hutchison.
In 1994, politics was getting pretty tense here and very, very prickly. It was the rise of the Gingrich era when everybody said, "Ooh, why are you working with her? She's a Republican." And they were saying to her, "Oh, why are you working with Barbara? She's a Democrat." We were working on the economic empowerment of women. We then went out and had dinner. We had the best time. And we said, we're having so much fun, why don't we invite the other women and just get to know each other? 3 rules: no staff, no memos, no leaks. You know, what happens with the appetizers stays with the appetizers.
We enjoy each other's company, and we can laugh about the things that have happened to us that we share in common that maybe others wouldn't understand.
The dinners are really fun. For example, we have talked about our campaigns, and the point is not about, do Democrats win or Republicans win? It's about some of the challenges a lot of us have faced and what it's like to run. And there are hints to hand round. It's the feeling that you've got some people who are pulling for you.
I'll never forget riding on the subway to a vote and one of the senior Republican senators saying to me, "I hear you women got together for dinner again the other night. What do you talk about?" I told him that we were planning the coup.
My understanding of a lot of women who have come to the Senate is they certainly aren't eager to become part of an old boy network. They are not going to sit on the sidelines and wait until they build up seniority. They dive right in.
Women were now serving on and even chairing some of the most powerful committees, from appropriations to budget to armed services.
I don't think the Old Boy Network is nearly what it used to be. And I think one of the reasons for that is that we have a large number of women in the United States Senate who simply aren't going to stand for it.
This new girls' network harkens back to a more collegial time among senators that in recent years has been absent, especially as Congress and the country have grown more ideologically strident.
Indisputably, there has been increasing partisanship in both the House and Senate. Over the previous few years, with the debt ceiling fiasco, with the fiscal cliff crisis, it was one crisis after another, all created by Congress.
Excessive political polarization in Washington today is preventing us from tackling our problems in this period of monumental consequences for our nation.
It wasn't about the policy and what was best for the country. It became what was best for the political interests of a political party and the next election. So it all led to that calamitous moment where they had to shut down for 16 days.
Good evening. It appears likely now that barring a big last-minute change, large portions of the federal government will shut down tonight at midnight Eastern Time, the first time in 17 years.
More than 800,000 federal workers will be affected, and every national park will be closed.
Veterans' disability claims will not be decided. The WIC nutrition program for needy women and children may have to shut down.
Save the people! Do your job!
A group of veterans clashed with police.
You work for us! You work for us!
In 2013, conservatives in the House made a tactical decision. They would refuse to approve the federal budget in an attempt, after many failed efforts, to overturn the Affordable Care Act. Their actions effectively shut down the federal government.
This is a fight right now between Republicans. It's between common sense Republicans who want to do their jobs and those who just want to say, no, it's my way or the highway. And that's not how government works.
The whole idea that the government was shut down and that we were bleeding money and not doing our job. Talk about, lose-lose. Everything about it was awful. And it was the women of the Senate who said, we're going to reach out and do something about that.
The Thursday before the shutdown, Senator Ayotte and I were on the same plane going home. I said to her, why don't you and I sponsor something, a dinner Monday night when we get back for all of the women? Senator Ayotte thought that was a great idea. So we had a number of the women senators here for pizza, and all of us started thinking about what could we do as women to try and end the shutdown.
While the women of the Senate were looking for a solution, some of their male colleagues dug in their heels and appeared on television to blame the other side.
I think it's extremely bad for the president to shut down the government.
The Democrats want government by crisis. They want shutdowns. This is Harry Reid's shutdown.
Colleague after colleague from each side of the aisle
Tea Party driven
was denouncing the other side. Not a single one of my friends and colleagues were offering any kind of solution. It is past time that we reason together on how to bring this impasse to an end. The first people that I heard from were women, and the whole effort snowballed.
And I would say to my Republican colleagues in the House and to some in this chamber, it's time for a reality check.
We've got a responsibility to govern, and we're not doing that right now.
This was not a game. We were messing with people's lives effectively. And it was important that there be adults in the room who said, no, enough messaging on this.
And now what you have is women who are in positions of leadership where they have the ability to make everybody come together and behave.
The leadership and the agenda was set by the women in the group. We all debated and discussed and agreed, but it was their leadership that I think brought critical mass of Republican and Democrats together and came up with a solution, finally ending the shutdown.
16 days after the shutdown began, the Senate leaders reached a deal to reopen the government, and it was the women who were credited with making it happen.
Women in the Senate is a good thing. And you see leadership, and we're all just glad that they allowed us to tag along so we could see how it's done. Isn't that right?
Women span the ideological spectrum, and I always rebel against the notion that somehow we think alike or have identical views on issues. We don't. But what we do share is a commitment to problem solving.
We are less focused on self-aggrandizement, less focused on power building, less focused on getting credit. And as a result, we're able to help move legislation whether our name's on the bill or not. And that makes a huge difference.
There's always a way through. You've just got to find it. You've got to be creative enough to see where those opportunities are. And if you can't find them, then to create them.
The resolution of the shutdown illustrated just how much Congress had been transformed by the inclusion of women. Still, women comprise only 20% of the Senate and even less in the House, even though they are the majority of voters in the country.
Our program will begin in 2 minutes. Please take your seats. Please take your seats. Our program is about to begin.
I think it was really a new experience to see a woman on the national level like this doing a job that was typically done by men and not really something people were willing to accept yet. I never had a sense that there was anything I couldn't do. Being a girl didn't matter. In fact, the opposite. You can do anything. And so I was kind of raised with that awareness that there are no limitations. They asked me if I could type. Really? That was my first, head banging right into the cement wall of sexism. So I went to law school. I figured, get a law degree, they can't stop me from practicing law because I'm a woman. It was suggested that I wear pastels, suggested that I speak more softly, suggested that I smile more. And I thought, I'm not going to let these guys tell me to go curtsy and wear a pinafore. That's ridiculous. This is not a dinner party. This is a murder trial.
Yes, Marcia Clark has a new do. Old Clark, new Clark.
She found herself under scrutiny for everything, even the short skirt she wore during the tour of the Simpson estate.
There was not one thing I didn't know and commit to memory. Nothing I didn't fix, touch, handle a million times before walking into court. If this is all you can talk about, my hair and the length of my skirts, we haven't come as far as I thought or hoped. Ito never lost an opportunity to undermine me in front of the jury. He was dismissive, condescending, and downright rude in a way that he never was to any of the men. He was completely oblivious to his own misogyny.
Cannot succumb to the temptation to thwart justice and throw truth out the window.
I'm going to have to stop you right here. I've warned you 3 times now. Okay.
All we're asking is that
Counsel.
I'm
warning you. I've warned you 3 times now.
I'm concluding right now, Your Honor.
Please.
May I?
Please.
Thank you.
At the end of the day, you can't let the fact that you have a sexist on the bench affect your job. But the rulings were so terrible. I remember there was a moment in court when I was objecting because they were going all over the place with things that were completely irrelevant. And I was overruled again and again and again. And I could feel my stomach nodding, knowing these are all wrong rulings. Every single one is burying the truth under a mountain of garbage. There's no way to say that there wasn't enough evidence to convict. It's a question of whether you're willing to.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant not guilty of the crime of murder.
The trial of O.J. Simpson is over. He is not guilty.
Today, his imprisonment and trial are over, but the questions raised about race, the police, the judicial system are not.
I just remember thinking, wow, they really did it. It left me with a hole in my heart about all of the social injustice that led to a verdict like this. The divide was so profound. I walked out of the courtroom and never went back. every movement, you have a step forward and then there's a retraction. I think we have another awakening that's happening now, and that's really a beautiful thing to see. I was interviewed a lot by millennials. The reporters I spoke to, both male and female, were outraged at the sexism they saw as they studied the case. They said, "Did you really go through that? Is that true?" I said, "Oh, yeah." They were disbelieving, stunned, and outraged. That's a whole new world we're living in. That is progress.
Ladies and gentlemen, Marcia Clark and Nancy Armstrong.
Oh, Marcia. That every time I watch it, it makes me cry. I mean, I produced it, and I usually tailor them to make people cry and feel something, but I'm so glad you're here because your story is so critical to the discussion that we've been having over the last 36 hours at this conference. And you're coming into a pretty incredible third act, which was ignited in part by a resurgent interest in the Simpson trial, and more specifically in your role in it. The FX series from 2016, The People versus O.J. Simpson, won a Golden Globe and shed a light on aspects of this trial that kind of went over our head in the 90s. You know, it didn't really penetrate the American consciousness. So it's been wonderful to reframe this. But I have to ask, you had nothing to do with the series. What was your reaction when you found out that this whole saga was going to play out on national television again?
I was miserable. I was miserable. Well, first of all, actually, my initial feeling was when I heard about it, the rumblings, they were going to do this, I thought, never going to happen. Then I heard Ryan Murphy's making it. Oh, shit, it's going to happen. And then I heard Sarah Paulson was going to play me. I said, wow. You know, I mean, that is an honor. I think she's a genius.
She did an incredible job.
She's amazing. So I thought, okay, well, at least somebody. But what I never expected, so then, of course, I predicted no one would watch. So obviously, if you want to know how a show is going to do and how to predict the ratings, don't ask me. Because I said no one's going to care about that. And then, of course, it was a huge hit. And then the most surprising thing of all was that Ryan Murphy chose to shine a spotlight on the sexism in the case, which no one had ever commented on, and I thought no one ever would. And then it became something completely beyond simply a television series.
So how many remember watching the so-called trial of the century back in the 90s? Raise your hand. Oh, that's a lot. Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is that, you know, we didn't realize this at the time, or at least I didn't, but feminism was a little bit radioactive in the 90s, or maybe a lot radioactive. And no one wanted to talk about sexism. And here you were walking into work every day, into a courtroom that was ground zero of sexism and misogyny. We saw the Ito clip, which was appalling enough, but there are other clips of Shapiro calling you overly emotional and Cochran calling you hysterical in a moment when she was clearly not hysterical. It was on camera. She was just winning the argument. And do you think they had any clue what was going on? Did they have any sense that it was just so wildly inappropriate?
Right, so you and I, we were talking about this, and you were kind of thinking that they were doing it on purpose, that they were saying these gendered things, making these gendered remarks to kind of get to me, and, you know, and throw that stick in the spokes.
Distract from the evidence. Let's you know, tap into the gender bias that exists in America, and then people go, oh, well, that's true, and undermine you.
Mm-hmm. And my answer was, no, don't give them that much credit. They were not aware of their own misogyny. They were not aware of their own gender bias, the ways, the sexist behaviors that they engaged in, and the sexist thinking that was so much a part of them. It was just what they were thinking. This is the way you talk about a woman. You talk about her as being emotional. You talk about her as being hysterical. Anytime a woman raises her voice and shows her power, they find a way to reduce it, to minimize it. But it's not, I think, a planned thing. It's just the response. And it's the way that I think men were raised to think about women, so that, and in ways that are really kind of shocking. They framed me up, so to speak, as someone who
went with my gut. I go with my gut instinct. Believe me, in trial, you have no choice. You must be extremely prepared, but then you must go with your gut because your decisions get made like this, like this, like this. Object, don't object. Think, don't stand up, don't stand up. Look at the jury, don't look at the jury. These are second by second. You must go with your gut. When they say that of a man, he goes with his gut, it's considered to be a wonderful thing. It shows his power, it shows his strength. For a woman to go with her gut to take on that kind of power, they refuse. You know, women cannot have that kind of power. So when a woman goes with her gut, she's accused of being impulsive, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Same kind of thinking.
What was that like for you, though? I mean, going in, as Natalie Portman said on Monday, you were isolated. What was it like to walk in knowing every single day that was what was going to happen? And how did you feel at the end of a day like that, every day for a year?
So the sexism was not the thing that was foremost on my mind. I was used to it. Most judges were not like Ito, I have to say. He was a uniquely awful example. And most, even though they might have been older and some of them were former detectives, which can be very sexist, were still, when they saw me stand up and, you know, and work the case without any qualms, without fear, they gave me full respect. Ida was a different story. But what upset me, what was the painful thing, was the fact that the rulings were going to come in badly every day. Every day I walked into court knowing the wrong thing was going to happen, and it was going to happen over and over again, no matter what I did. And that Ida would personally get in my way, but more importantly, in the way of the case. And so I knew that justice was going to get thwarted every day, no matter how hard we worked. That was the hard part.
And the disappointing thing, too, is that the media was totally complicit. I mean, was it so shocking in 1995 to have a woman in that position with that kind of power, or were they simply reflecting a more pervasive attitude in the country that a woman didn't belong in that position? Why should you have that position?
It's a really hard question to answer because there's so, you know, how to unpack that. I think that when you talk about the feminist revolution that supposedly occurred 20 years earlier, well, when I think of revolution, I think of real change, and I think of objective change. I think of change that gives you childcare, maternity leave, no glass ceiling, equal rights when it comes to pay, equal rights when it comes to job promotion and the ability to get a job. Those things hadn't happened. What you did have were the omens of change, the icons, like Gloria Steinem, who's, you know, one of these people who opens her mouth and pearls fall out. She's amazing. And she was like my hero.
She's still here? Where's Gloria?
Is she here?
Gloria's still here? No, she's not here. She was here.
She was my hero. She was the woman who I looked up to and thought, that's where it's at. That's what we want. Now, you need those people because otherwise you have to see it to be it. If you don't see it, you know, if you don't see that person standing up and being that person, you don't know to dream. So they're necessary and they're important. They're incredibly important. But the changes that a woman like that is asking for have not yet taken place, had not taken place. The fact that I was, in '95, the first woman in Special Trials Unit, what's that about? You know, I mean, there should have been many before me. There weren't. Now there are. So we're starting to see the change, and of course the Me Too movement, Time's Up movement are incredibly important. Now we're seeing some real grassroots movement. Now we're seeing physical change in the world that can make women's lives better and allow for the kind of revolution we were talking about before. But in the 90s, it had not yet happened. The sexist thinking was still there. Women were still expected to really basically be home caregivers, child raisers, and when they stepped out into the work world, there was still a great deal of skepticism and suspicion and even derision because you're abandoning your role.
What were the labels? I mean, you know, you were just doing your job, and the qualities that made you effective in your job, aggressive, outspoken, relentless, were all in the glare of the media spotlight. You know, qualities that cast you with a few labels that were unpleasant. What were some of those labels?
Oh, I don't even know if I can say them here. I mean, a bitch, shrill, strident, emotional. I love that one. Emotional. Yeah, I was pissed off. I mean, every day. I don't call that emotional. I call that, you know, accurately putting my finger on the pulse of what was going on in that courtroom. So yeah, it was that kind of, and all of it, when you think about it, all of it is demeaning, all of it is minimizing, all of it is a way to shrink a woman into basically a child.
Particularly in light of the fact that those same characteristics were clearly abundant in the 6 or so male attorneys that made up the defense counsel, and they also received a new label.
The Dream Team.
That's right.
Though they whined and bitched and moaned. I call them on it all the time.
Well, here's where there's hope, I think. Drawing a line between your experience and what's happening in the world today is that if those dynamics of sexism and misogyny were to play out in a courtroom today, there would no longer be a collective shrug. There would be massive public outcry and a movement to shut it down. And that's progress, right?
I agree. And in that respect, social media has really been a great thing for women because we can actually see each other speak. We can actually see what each other is doing. We can do Instagram. We can do a lot of ways in which we can reach out to each other, and you can see other women doing it. You can get support from one another, and women, I think, would be more supportive in today's world, wouldn't be so afraid to stand up and say, hey, this is wrong.
Let's talk about the issue made at the time of you being a working mother. This was portrayed in the FX series really brilliantly, the way in which you were inexorably wedged between perfect professionalism and perfect parenthood, which, by the way, is a fantasy concept, and just the audacity of a working mother to go for the top role. And what was the climate around being a working mother and having that kind of a job?
Yeah, so let me start by saying a perfect this or a perfect that. No one's perfect anything. Even if you are a child caregiver and you would elect to be at home and do that full time, you're not going to be perfect. If you elect not to have children and you go to work, you're not going to be perfect. So the idea that you could do both and be perfect is insane, and it's not real, and it's another way of keeping women locked up in that kitchen, barefoot and pregnant. With respect to doing both, having children and also having a high-power career, again, I mean, this is about not allowing women to have their power. You know, all of it is about keeping women away from the levers of power, keeping women out of the workplace, keeping women away from places where they can have an impact on the world by saying you can't have it all, quote unquote, even though, of course, men always have. So, I mean, this is definitely something that we need to fight against and we need to overcome. I think there is still some degree of skepticism, suspicion, a negative impact of seeing a woman who has children working, you know, and doing a high-powered job. And I think that's something, that kind of bias is something we need to overcome. I think women less so than the men we work with who still, I hear them asking, so are you going to go get pregnant? Are you going to, you know, what about your children? In a job situation where you'd never ask a man that. And I mean, I heard this happen just not a few, this was like within the past month. And it was an interview, and the man in the group asked this woman who has children, who's a 2-year-old child, well, what about your kid? And I thought, if she was a man, would you ask her that? Right.
So, what about this issue of now with all of these new rules and regulations, and a lot of men are saying, you know, I don't know how to act now. I don't know who I should talk to, and I'm afraid to work with women. I mean, what do you say to that, and what's your advice?
Oh, boo fucking who? I mean, you know, my heart is breaking. I mean, really, seriously? Dude, you know, first of all, learn what it's like to have to mince your words, hold back, worry about offending, worry about upsetting, worry about threatening. We've been doing it for how many thousands of years? And we had to figure it out. More than that, you know, really, is there no way to know? Is a woman not sitting next to you? Do you not have a mother? Do you not have a sister, a daughter, a cousin, a niece? Come on, man. So, yeah, no, I understand. I appreciate them asking the question. I do. But, you know, really get a clue.
So what do you say to a woman who is in a position that is not as visible, that doesn't have a voice, and that is currently dealing with a situation where she you know, has sexism and gender bias and misogyny thrown at her on a daily basis.
Well, but she is visible. She is visible to her male coworkers. She's visible to her brothers, to her fathers, to her sons, to her nephews. You get the picture. There's something you can do on a daily basis to make sure that you make a difference. By talking to them, by teaching them what's the right way to act, by telling them when they step out of line, by saying, no, that's not okay. By when they make some kind of sexist remark, call them on it. These are the people close to you. You can talk to them, and that will make a difference because those men you're talking to are somebody else's coworkers, somebody else's boss, somebody else's employee, somebody else and human resources who can have his mind opened and understand how to behave with women and how to act so that they're not making gendered remarks, sexist remarks. You can make a difference every single day. Of course, there's Time's Up. These are movements that you can contribute to. There are women's marches, and I think the ability to show solidarity and see all of us together, to see how much support we actually have and can give each other is really important, which brings me to the other part is we must support each other. Women for too long have undermined other women. I see it less so now. I actually see women much more capable and much more willing and eager even to stand up for one another, but it's critical that we do, because if we don't, we can never move forward. We at least must be our own best friends.
Okay, quickly before we wrap up, just you have two very exciting projects coming up, so tell us quickly about the first one with A&E.
So A&E, it's the first 48. It's been a long-standing running show on A&E, and I'm a spin-off. It's the first 48, Marcia Clark Investigates. It airs March 29th on A&E, and we'll be doing notorious cases.
What kind of cases?
These first batch of 7 will be notorious cases. Chandra Levy, Robert Blake, Jam Master Jay, that kind of, you know, those.
All female victims killed by men they knew and loved.
Shocking.
Yeah. What about you just inked a deal with ABC?
So, yes, and I just sold a pilot with my co-writers, showrunners Liz Craft and Sarah Fain, with Mandeville Productions, Lori Zacks. It's a 1-hour drama pilot based on kind of a little bit of my life. Maya Travis is the lead attorney who loses a big case, leaves the DA's office, and then when it appears the defendant killed again, they bring her back. And what happens when she goes back into the DA's office to prosecute again.
I love that. Well, good luck, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much. It was an honor.
Thank you, Marcia.
It's an honor. Thank you for having me.
No one can speak for a woman like a woman. Who we are can't be articulated by anyone but us. Society preferred us to be seen and not heard. And I think it was because there was this recognition, if we heard what they had to say, we might be in trouble. We lived in the Cabrini Green housing projects. You had extreme racial segregation, extreme poverty, like concentrated on top of each other. And it always felt like you were imprisoned by where you lived. And it was scary. I had been sexually abused and assaulted as a child. And so my mother was very mindful that she wanted me to be safe in our home. So she often slept on the floor of our apartment so that I could have my own room. She told me, because you are a Black girl, your life is going to be difficult. And the choice is yours of how you tackle it. And there was a challenge to that, to prove to the world what I had to offer. When the judge came out, everyone had to stand up. And I was like, I want to be a judge. I want people to stand up when I walk into the room. And my mother said, you have to be a lawyer first. I was one of them. I mean, these are kids who were in our foster care system because their parents were struggling with mental health issues, with drug addiction issues, living in extreme poverty. And so it almost felt divine when I was able to say, you're not gonna shortchange these children because you don't think that they have potential. I mean, that thing about our belief in who deserves safety, was like front and center in that job. I thought the power was in the state's attorney's office, and I wanted to have that power. I think it was audacious to say that I'm gonna go up against my boss, but I thought we aren't doing things the way we should be doing them. I think we can do things better. The campaign trail was hard. I was flat out sexually harassed, having people treat me like a piece of meat, having people discredit my value and worth was horrifying. How do you tell your daughters if you lose that sometimes you have to put everything that you value on the line for a greater good? But I didn't want to have that conversation. I wanted to win. I asked myself a lot growing up, why is this happening to me? And I thought when I got into the state's attorney's office, this is why. I knew that our criminal justice system was broken. Men and women who've been in prison for decades for crimes that they didn't commit, and the horror that that is, how do we allow that to happen? It's easier to blame bad people for doing bad things than to talk about failed systems that continue to inflict harm on community. We are losing the possibility that dies on our streets when we leave these communities behind, and that's on all of us. I think there are things that we can do. I think it starts with having women in senior leadership positions, and I would fight tooth and nail to make sure that we give women the opportunity. Your experience is yours, but whatever has happened to you happened so that you can uplift others, and people are counting on that. Just go for it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kim Foxx.
People are gonna think that I say that I want people to stand when I walk in a room on purpose. The subliminal messaging that was in that. Thank you all so very, very much. Over the course of the last couple of days, having been here, I have to tell you that my mind was flipping in 1,000 different directions of the story that I wanted to tell that leads me to be in this space today, to talk about my journey for criminal justice reform after listening to the women here who bared their souls, and that I had borne my soul on the campaign trail because it matters. I ran for this office in a position in which is mostly men. Of elected prosecutors across the United States, less than 1% of them are women of color. Less than 1%. Almost 80% of elected prosecutors are white men. But when we look at our criminal justice system, when we look at our justice system in the city of Chicago, which is where I live and I grew up, and we look at the people who come through our jails or who have been victims of crime, they're overwhelmingly Black and Latino. When we look at the young women who come through our juvenile temporary detention centers, the majority of them have been sexually abused or traumatized. There is this notion when people hear about the fact that I come from public housing, one of the worst public housing projects in the country, that I came from the product of a single-parent household, a mother who was 18 when she had me, 17 when she had my brother, that I was sexually abused and assaulted, that I was homeless for a period of time in high school, that I went to a school early in life that was underfunded and under-resourced, and moved a mile to a school that had every opportunity for me to grow and thrive. And I became a lawyer, and the top lawyer. And people ask me all the time, how did you do that? How did you make it? And they ask with such earnestness, how did you make it? And I turn the question back on all of you who may be inquiring, that question is based on the premise that I was supposed to fail. It is based on the premise that a young black girl from public housing who came from a single-parent household, a teenage mother, a victim of sexual abuse and trauma, should be in our criminal justice system, just not as his top prosecutor. And that's why I ran for this job. I ran for this job because I have more in common with the people who come through our criminal justice system than the people who work for me. That when we look at the factors that lead to crime and violence in our neighborhoods, and we look at the issues related to concentrated poverty, when we look at the issues related to drug addiction and mental health, and I've been very vocal and very public about the fact that my mother was someone who suffered from depression all of her life, who smoked marijuana on a regular basis to quiet the voices and the stress. Then when I look at the people who come through our systems and how our criminal justice system addresses them, treats them, how we beg for humanity in our policies, it requires that everywhere I go, I tell my story. Because it's not because I'm exceptional. The only person who should think that is my husband. I am not exceptional. I have been afforded an exceptional opportunity to lead this office. But when I look at what we've done in criminal justice policy, when I look at what has happened across our systems, and how we would treat someone who comes from the exact same background as me, and we lock them up because they have done things that all of us have done, the onus becomes on me as the prosecutor, as the chief law enforcement officer who has the power to charge and also the power to overturn. To say that people ought not beg our systems to treat them humanely. Our systems ought to be run by people who are human. And that requires us to dig deep into who we are and rationalize why we do what we do. When I came into this office, I was the first African-American elected to this position. And there was a lot of scuttlebutt about what would happen when you have the first black person in a system where 86% of the people in our jail are black and brown, or 94% of the people in our juvenile detention center are black and brown. And would she come in with the lens of someone who has lived those experiences? Absolutely. Unapologetically. I come to this work not like the 80% of those who have not had this experience. I come to this work not to pretend as though to do this work you must be tough and you must be strong. You must pound on tables. I come to this work as a child who's experienced the systems in all of its failures and all of its possibilities. And so that is meant for me being unapologetic about hiring a mostly female executive team. It's been unapologetic about saying we need a chief diversity officer who will make sure that our office is reflective of the communities that we serve, and not simply just in numbers related to race and ethnicity, but experience. It means that when I look at our policies as it relates to mental health, that I'm actively working with partners to say that jails are not the place to deal with mental health issues. That when I look at our issues related to drugs and addiction, that my heart doesn't go cold when someone who we've put in a diversion program fails once, twice, or maybe 7 times. Because I've been close enough in proximity to those who have suffered from the demons of addiction to know that they are not bad people. They are people who are dealing with public health crises. It is someone who has worked around juvenile justice issues because I've seen, as a lawyer and an advocate for children in our foster care systems, that we have a school-to-prison pipeline that we all recognize that young kids who experience trauma in their lives, who've gone through our systems, have a 7 times higher likelihood of ending up in our adult system. And I can't wait for the gush at the end of the pipe to decide that I want to do something. That as a prosecutor, I don't abdicate my responsibility to be a morally upright human and say that when we get things wrong, the onus is not on someone to bring it to my attention, that we immediately step forth and fix it and do everything that we can to not repeat that. And that is meant in the first year of my office, doing the first ever mass exoneration in Cook County for men who were convicted of crimes for which they did not commit. It is meant working on issues like bail reform, an issue that women are disproportionately impacted by, that we have people sitting in our jails every single day, not because they are a threat to our community, but because they can't afford low levels amount of bond. And what people don't realize is that women tend to show up to pay that bond for men. Men tend not to show up to pay that bond for women. And these are women who are accused, not yet convicted. This is pretrial. These are mothers who, while awaiting trial, sometimes for the littlest of offenses, are not there to care for their children. These are children who are there, who are unable to care for elderly parents. These are workers who are hourly, that one day in incarceration can cause them to lose their jobs and their housing. And that matters to me as someone who has been homeless with a mother who worked very, very hard. And the separation from her income caused devastation to our family. And then when we look and talk about bond reform, that again, it should be prosecutors who have the power in those spaces to say that we must do better. I've taken this job and this responsibility and these issues of justice reform at a time when the country is awakening to what's happening in our criminal justice system. Films like The 13th that show us the history that we've adopted in this country of using incarceration to deal with our injustices. What I have to say, wherever I go, is that if we do not acknowledge the racist ideologies that have been embedded in our criminal justice system and not have the painful conversations about the consequences of those policies on families, then we wait 20, 30 years and look at the devastation of a war on drugs that was never about a war on drugs and what has happened to those neighborhoods and those communities and those children. If we do not have the difficult conversations about where we are rooted in race in our justice system, that we will continue to have policies that inflict harm. And I became a prosecutor to advocate on behalf of communities. As a girl who suffered the horrors of victimization, there was no job more honorable to me than to hold the hand of a victim and tell them that I've been there too and you'll be okay too. But we cannot do that with integrity and honor if we do not acknowledge that is wrong in our systems and be the warriors that fight for it. So I leave here today saying to all of you that as you go back into your communities and you look at your criminal justice system and you ask who's there and you ask who's your top prosecutor and you ask do they share the same values and beliefs in humanity and the potential and possibility in everyone that they serve. Never in a million years could anyone have imagined that a poor Black girl from Cabrini Green would stand on the cusp of history as the first African-American woman Cook County State's attorney. But if we did not invest in me, I wouldn't be here today. Let's make that investment for all of our children. Thank you. Thank you.
There is no one individual who better personifies the concept of equal protection than my client, Edie Windsor.
What I do for a living is take risks. You can't be a litigator and walk into court every day and argue in front of judges, some of whom may be very hostile to your case, and not be willing to take risks. The Defense of Marriage Act, or DOMA, basically said that for purposes of federal law, a marriage between gay people is not a marriage. In federal law, there's over 1,100 statutes and regulations that are based on your status as being married. For gay people, all those were null and void. During the testimony in Congress, people said truly horrific things about gay people. The House report says that it's being passed due to moral disapproval of homosexuality. This is the first time in over 200 years of U.S. history where the federal government had refused to defer to states in deciding who can get married. One of the things that very much kept me in the closet at the time was the sense that I wanted to get married and I wanted to be a mother. One of the lessons that I've had learned from the New York case is that if you just focused on one couple, people would really be able to understand what happened. When I met Edie Windsor in 2009, it just was immediately apparent to me that this was the story. Edie and Thea had met in the early 60s. Thea, about 10 or so years into their relationship, was diagnosed with a terrible form of multiple sclerosis. They both made sure that as little in their lives changed as possible. They've gotten married in Toronto. By the time Thea died in 2009, they were together for 44 years. Making Edie pay this tax simply by virtue of the fact that she was gay was unconstitutional. It violated equal protection principles. The mainstream gay rights establishment did not think that this was the right case to bring. My gut and my instincts and everything I'd learned as a lawyer for 20 years taught me that it absolutely was. We filed the case in early 2010. I try to keep my feelings about my cases and my clients separate from my own personal things. But obviously, in the Windsor case, it was something I felt close to. We were going to have a child, and we thought it was important for us to be married. But the idea that we couldn't get married in our own home state was upsetting. I spent about 2 months working on this almost full-time to get ready. We had a section in our brief. I probably rewrote 952 times. And I had a post-it on my computer that said, "It's all about Edie stupid." We'd done all this preparation, and there really wasn't anything else that we could do. So I spent the afternoon before the argument watching Johnny Test cartoons with my son in my hotel room with milk and cookies, which is probably the best thing I could do to prepare for the argument. And we got there early. There was such a rush and crowd of people. I paced a lot during that hour. And then the argument starts. And you only have 15 minutes.
No one has identified any legitimate difference between gay couples and straight married couples that can possibly explain the sweeping, undifferentiated, and categorical discrimination of DOMA.
There was this debate between the Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Scalia and I about what had changed.
There's a revolution going on in the states. We either adopt the revolution or push it along a little, or we stay out of it.
Congress did not stay out of it. Section 3 of DOMA is not staying out of it.
You just referred to a sea change in people's understandings and values from 1996 when DOMA was enacted, and I'm just trying to see where that comes from.
I think it comes from a moral understanding today that gay people are no different, and that gay married couples' relationships are not significantly different than the relationships of straight married couples.
Flipping from the moral disapproval to the moral understanding is what just popped into my head there. And it was a pretty good answer, I think, because it's pretty hard to come back with a counter to that one, because it's clearly so obviously true. They kept announcing all the other cases and put off our case till the very end. It was incredibly stressful, and it was the last day. When we saw on SCOTUS blog, 1, Windsor was the first case, 2, opinion by Justice Kennedy, 3, dissent by Scalia. We knew at that point that we'd won. Pandemonium broke out in my apartment. A lot of people were crying, a lot of screaming, that was me, and just exultation. That Sunday was the Gay Pride Parade in New York City, and Edie was the marshal. It was just an incredible time. This has got to be one of the only, if not the only, landmark Supreme Court case where not only was the client a woman, but the entire team was run by women. There's still plenty of mornings where I wake up and I kind of have to pinch myself. Is this really what I did?
Ladies and gentlemen, Robbie Kaplan, Marissa Blair, and Lydia Polgreen.
Selfish for a second, and I'm going to tell Robbie something I've never told her, which is that the day that the DOMA decision was handed down, my now wife and I, who've been together for now 22 years, were in the New York City Marriage Bureau applying for our marriage license.
Oh my God.
So it was, and I looked at my phone and I saw that the DOMA had been overturned, and we were married a couple of days later. And it was, so even though I didn't know you at the time, you, and my wife's here today, so you've played a big role in making our life together possible, so thank you.
You know, let me just say one thing. This is the first time I've actually seen that video. You know, Edie passed away this past September at the age of 87. And this is the first time I've seen the video since she passed away. And she would be so psyched about this. I mean, she so loved everything she did in the case and the victory and her life afterwards. But she would really be into this right here today. In some way, she's looking down on us all.
Well, and I think that something that Edie would also be excited about is the case that we're here to talk about today. One of the hallmarks of Robbie's work through the years is not just concern with something that's obviously has personal resonance for you, but the broader arc of justice. You have taken on a really challenging case involving trying to bring justice to the victims and people who are affected by the so-called Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. And we have with us Marissa, who's one of the plaintiffs in the case. And I would love to hear from you, Marissa, about your experience that day. Why did you go? Why was it important to you? And what happened?
Well, me and my fiance, we didn't know if we were going to go at first. We had been told from the start, you know, there was a KKK rally months before. They said, that's JV, this is going to be varsity. So didn't know if we were going to go. We saw the torch rallies on August 11th, and it just looked like something out of the history books. So we were like, you know what? No, this is our city. They're not going to come here and not meet resistance. We're going to go. We're going to go. We're going to spread love. We're going to show them there are more good people in the world than there are bad, and that we're going to join together. So we got there, and it was a lot of hate, but we found a group of, it was clowns in the street, people giving hugs, handing out water, we were singing, everyone was happy. And that's what we went to go do. We went to go find the happy people, to spread love, be with people that were like us, and to kind of stay away from, you know, the alt-right, all the hate. We just wanted to say, hey, we're out here too, you're not gonna scare us. So we went out there, and we were there with my friend Heather and Courtney, and my fiance, and I'll tell anyone, we were so happy in the moment leading right up to that moment. And, you know, car plowed through. It was pandemonium. We didn't know really what was going on. We just wanted to, you know, make sure everyone was okay, everyone was safe. Unfortunately, you know, we lost my good friend, Heather. But a lot of goods come out of it. A lot of people have come together. They've been very supportive. We were out there just to show, hey, everyone's equal. Everyone, you know, deserves the right to be loved. It doesn't matter what religion you are, what sex you are, what race you are. We were just out there trying to spread love. And, you know, we met hate, but even, you know, Robbie's, you know, helping us, you know, show, hey, they didn't come out there to just, you know, First Amendment, freedom of speech, right to assemble, right to bear arms. They were out there to incite violence, to scare people. And we wanted to let them know that we weren't going to be scared. And we're still not scared, but, you know, it's heartbreaking.
I'm sure a lot of you saw on TV and on the front pages of newspapers, if anybody reads those anymore, the extraordinary, horrifying photo of your fiance being hit by that car. And I understand that he was quite badly injured, and he's required surgery for his leg and ankle.
Yeah, he shattered his tibia in his leg, completely shattered, fractured his ankle. He has 2 screws in it now. And he's having, you know, yesterday he was walking a little bit with a limp. So some days are better
than others, but we'll tell you it's more mental than anything. I'm so glad that he's healed. He's glad that he's healed. He's ready to get back to work. He hates sitting at home, but it's more mental than anything.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember when I met Marcus, he said to me, you know, they can fix my leg. They can put in the pins. He's like, but they'll never completely fix my mind from what happened to us that day.
Well, Robbie, why was it important to you to take on this case, to file this case?
So it really kind of happened as happenstance. I left a law firm that I was at for 25 years this summer, and we were in our new office space and started a new woman-led law firm. And we were in our new office space with like folding chairs and folding tables kind of moving in. And I might as well say this because I know who's speaking next. A person who calls himself the President of the United States gave a speech, as everyone knows about, in which he said that there were good people on both sides. And we decided that in my office that we were going to kind of watch that speech as a group, all the lawyers in the office and paralegals together, and we did on someone's computer. And then I started to think about it a little bit, and I remembered that years ago my old law firm had brought a case against these really radical anti-abortion activists who had a website called the Nuremberg Files. And on that website, they would put up the photographs and personal information about doctors who were performing abortions. And then as those doctors were injured or killed, and that's what happened, they would put X's over their faces. And the theory of that case is that what those doctors were doing on that website was not free speech, that it was incitement to violence. And I said, why can't we apply that theory here? And 3 days later, we were on a plane to Charlottesville.
Now, you'd think that this kind of work is the work of the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, that perhaps in a different administration with a Attorney General who wasn't named Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, they'd have a different approach to this. Why have you had to step in here?
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, in ordinary times, I don't think we're living right now in ordinary times, but in ordinary times, we would have the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice would be bringing this case instead of us bringing this case. People don't know this actually, but many people don't know this, but the Department of Justice itself was formed after the Civil War to fight the Klan in the Deep South. That's the whole purpose of having the Department of Justice. And they should be doing that. Unfortunately, I think they're doing some like isolated prosecutions. They're prosecuting fields, but they're not doing the case that we're doing. We've sued 24 Nazis, white supremacists, and affiliated groups. And I believe in these times, private people have to step in. And thanks to the generosity of this amazing organization called Integrity First for America, who agreed to fund the lawsuit, that's what we're doing.
And this is not an inexpensive endeavor. I mean, there are multiple defendants. There are multiple defendants in the case, and they have been not so easy to track down, and a lot of them are on the run.
So probably most of you people know this, but when you bring a case against someone, you actually, in most circumstances, have to personally serve them. It means you have to hand the complaint to them. And handing the complaints to these guys has not been an easy thing. We've been working with the Southern Poverty Law Center and sharing guys who kind of travel around the country trailing them. We got one guy through his mom, because his mom didn't really know what he was involved with, and she like opened his door and we got him that way. But it was a huge endeavor, and it's still going on. We believe we've served everyone, but we haven't personally served still 4 of them, including Andrew England, who's still in hiding.
Yeah, yeah. What kind of impact has this had on your community in Charlottesville? It's obviously a college town. It's a place that we think of as being tolerant and having, but talk to me about Charlottesville post-Charlottesville.
Post-Charlottesville, I'd say to the rest of the United States. You know, you see UVA, you see, Thomas Jefferson. It's a progressive town, and it is. Charlottesville is a quaint little town, great places to eat, great community. But in the background, it's also been some racial divide. It's some police have been, taken to court for racial profile and things like that. So I think the citizens always knew it was that little bit of, racial inequality. But after the fact, Charlottesville has this feel to it now. It's not necessarily bad. It's very hopeful. I will say that the street where it happened, it's basically a memorial for Heather. It's amazing. You go there, you feel love. But now Charlottesville, it seems like we're trying to throw blame on a lot of people. They're trying to throw blames on the police officers, city council, everyone except the white nationalists that came, you know, they all came from out of state. They weren't natives of Charlottesville, natives of Virginia. They came out of state, you know, so now Charlottesville is left to pick up the pieces, but the community's been great in providing services just to help heal.
Robbie, obviously your career has traversed a lot of different arcs. I mean, you're an absolute top litigator at your firm in New York and have done a lot of different things. What is the connective thread with the different cases that you've taken on, particularly the ones you've been most passionate about?
Yeah, I would say two things. But first of all, you know, there are really 4 groups of people who the Nazis and white supremacists and KKK members in Charlottesville hate. They hate black folks, they hate gay folks, they hate Jews, and they hate women. I get 3 out of 4 of those myself. So I'm not their most favorite person in the world, but you know, I don't think it's at all surprising. You heard some of this in the panel the first day. I don't think it's all surprising that when someone's racist, they're also homophobic. And when someone's sexist, they're also racist. I mean, you see that, and when you look, you should read our complaint. It reads like this horrible dystopian novel. But their hatred to these groups was vicious. And they really, you know, they have stuff like, we want the Jews to be back in the ovens at Auschwitz. We think all gay men should be locked up in jail. You know, we think all black people should be lynched. It's the same stuff. So first of all, that's always motivated me. Second of all, I'm gonna be a little corny, but I have to go back to my childhood. When I was a kid growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, at a time where if you told me that I would ever have to sue Nazis, I would have told you you were nuts. My Torah portion was from Deuteronomy 16, in Hebrew, tzedek, tzedek tirdof, or justice, justice thou shalt pursue. And so I know it sounds corny, but I like to think sometimes those things have real meaning, and I've tried to live up to them.
Marcia, what do you hope will come out of this case?
I hope people will start to have those uncomfortable conversations. I think people always knew. I mean, honestly, you know, I think there's good in everyone. But to see so much hate, to see so much racism still exist, it's very disheartening. But I want people to still have hope. I want people to still believe that there are good people in the world. But at the same time, I want people to have uncomfortable conversation. If something's not right, then speak up about it. Don't just hide and say, oh, it's not me. It doesn't have to do with me. I'm not black. I'm not gay. Heather didn't do that. You know, it didn't matter. She was a white woman who spoke up for blacks, gays, you know, Jews, anyone. And I just want people to have uncomfortable conversations and point out something that's not right instead of sitting there and just saying it doesn't have to deal with me.
Now, Robbie, I know that you're going to hop on a plane after this to go to Hawaii. You're involved in another case. Obviously, we've had a lot of conversations about Time's Up here. You're representing a woman who has made allegations against Brett Ratner, a very well-known director. It seems as though they're trying to turn it back and they're suing her. It does seem as if the law is in some ways being used by some of these accused to intimidate people who are just standing up for their rights. What's been your approach?
Well, you're a superb lawyer, Lydia, because that's exactly our theory. Our client, this very brave woman named Melanie Kohler, who's a scuba diving instructor in Hawaii, hasn't lived in LA for 8 years. As a result of Me Too, kind of was motivated to tell her story and to tell her truth and put it up on a Facebook post. Within hours, she had a really nasty call from Mr. Ratner's lawyer, and within a couple days, she was sued for defamation. So, as you heard, I kind of like standing up for people like that. And we have a motion to dismiss saying that the whole point of this suit is to intimidate and threaten other women and to stop them from speaking, and that violates this thing called the First Amendment. It's actually the opposite of Charlottesville case.
Yeah.
That violates this thing called the First Amendment, and we're arguing it tomorrow morning in Honolulu.
Awesome. So you've made a career out of, yes, absolutely.
And look, the person to be clapping for really is Melanie Kohler, who had the bravery to do this, and then even knowing that someone as rich and powerful as Mr. Ratner was going to sue her, she still did it.
Yeah. Now, we've also been looking a lot at the judicial system as really the kind of last place of refuge for justice. You know, we have a highly politicized environment in which, you know, queer people, people of color, people who are not, you know, part of the religious majorities, whatever that is, We have an administration that's stacking the courts in a very unusual way. Are you concerned? Can you talk about what you think you'll be facing, what kind of judges you'll be facing, and the effect that that's likely to have on those communities? Horribly
concerned. So I'm going to give a shout out to a young woman professor, Leah Littman, who teaches at UCLA, and she's brilliant, a former Kennedy clerk. And she did an article the other day that talked about Trump's nominations. At the circuit level, only 3 out of 13 have been women. At the district court level, only 30% have been women. And for U.S. attorneys nationwide, those are the federal prosecutors in each jurisdiction, only 10% have been women. Those numbers are shocking. They're completely contrary to the past 2 administrations, even Republican administrations in the past. And that's going to, those people have lifetime tenure, at least the judges, and that's going to affect the system of justice for a long time, unfortunately.
Well, we've had a lot of great conversations about justice. Keep fighting. Thank you so much, Robbie, Marissa.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
I wanted to say it because I didn't want there to continue to be this divide. Like, okay, you can be passionate about human rights and then, okay, you can say something nice about women. No.
It is a violation of human rights when babies are drowned or suffocated simply because they are born girls. When women and girls are sold into the slavery of prostitution. When a leading cause of death among women is the violence they are subjected to in their own homes. When young girls are brutalized by the painful and degrading practice of genital mutilation. When women are denied the right to plan their own families. Human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights once and for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, live from New York, Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Hello, makers. Well, I got to tell you, I wish I could be there with you in person. I just heard the end of this last panel, and I'm just cheering you on. This conference really is important, especially now. You know, there's a line from a favorite poet, Muriel Rukeyser, that I think bears repeating. She wrote, "What would happen if one woman told the truth about her life? The world would split open." Well, that is exactly what we're witnessing right now in this extraordinary moment. And you've been talking about it. From Hollywood to politics to factory floors, everywhere, women are telling the truth about their lives. And let's make sure the world is never the same. You just heard a snippet from my speech in 1995 in Beijing. We shattered the silence, and more than 2 decades later, your gathering together continues the conversation. We've made progress, but not nearly enough. Issues are still being swept under the rug here at home and around the world. You've heard from experts who are examining and taking on the institutions and the deep cultural biases that have held women and girls back for too long. You've heard a lot of stories about women who banded together in solidarity to take on issues like sexual assault and harassment. And you've met real-life heroes who are breaking barriers and shattering stereotypes. So as we end this conference, each and every one of us has a job to do to ensure that what you heard, what you saw at Makers doesn't stay at Makers. It's time to harness the passion and momentum of this unprecedented moment, to fight as hard as we can to create meaningful, lasting change. You know, we have to be brave. We have to be brave enough to engage with people who disagree with us, brave enough to question and examine our own beliefs, brave enough to acknowledge that even those of us who have spent much of our life thinking about and fighting about gender issues, who even have firsthand experiences of navigating male-dominated industries, may not always get it right.
And we have to be brave enough to bring everyone together, thinking beyond corporate boardrooms and the corridors of companies and Congress, beyond our own lives, to lift up women of all incomes, ages, experiences, and backgrounds. Immigrant women, LGBT women, women with disabilities, women of color who are too often marginalized and sidelined. So many of you are already doing something to make this a reality. And the diverse voices that were represented at this conference have to keep being heard. That's why I love the theme, Raise Your Voice. There are lots of ways to raise your voice, our voices, to make a difference. Raising our voice at work, in the community, in the voting booth, in the courts, in every area that matters to our future. That's why I am so committed to asking everyone to please participate in the midterm elections this fall. Raise your voices as candidates for office, as supporters of candidates. I believe the only way to get sexism out of politics is to get more women into politics. And that's never been more at stake than right now for women and for our country, because we are living through an all-out assault on core values of democracy, free speech, the rule of law. We're in the midst of a war on truth, facts, and reason. And I know at times it can be overwhelming, but every one of us has the power to do something about it by insisting on truth and accuracy from elected leaders and the press, holding them accountable when they fail to meet that standard, by refusing to be silent in the face of racism, sexism, bigotry, or any rhetoric intended to incite hatred and violence, and by continuing to tell the truth about our lives. So let me add my voice. I pledge to continue to speak out. I pledge to never give up. I will do everything I can to keep my voice, number one. To advance the rights and opportunities of women. In the midst of this snowstorm, stay on the front lines of democracy. Thank you all for being part of this gathering of history makers, troublemakers, and change makers. Let's keep going. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Clinton. I wish you could see this incredible room of people standing here, cheering you on, and looking at you on this huge screen. What a way to give Hillary Clinton the final word after 3 days of raising our voices. A woman who has raised her voice her entire life. You stand up, you fight back, you never just sit on the sidelines when it comes to building a better future for women. You are the definition of what it means to be a maker, and we are so grateful that you have come here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan.
But, standing ovation, you can't see.
Thank you all.
But Hillary, hold on. Before you go, we'll let you, we have one last question. You know, Makers has just been this big, mega 3-day event, but in the next big global event is the Olympics. So we want to know, who are you rooting for? What are you going to watch? What's the story?
Dylan, I'm going to watch as much as I can see. I love the Winter Olympics. You know, I love the athleticism and the stories of our athletes. And I'm excited that Adam Rippon and Gus Kenworthy will be the first openly gay Olympians for the American team.
Oh, God.
So I'm going to be there cheering them on, whether it's skating or skiing or anything else. Although, I have to tell you, I shut my eyes at the luge and the skeleton. That's too scary, but I wait and open them to see who wins. So let's cheer our Olympians on, and let's take that Olympic spirit of trying to bring people together and fight for what we know is right.
Well, thank you, Secretary Clinton. From all of us, we love you.
Love
Goodbye.
you, Dylan. Love everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everybody. As the last moment of the Makers Conference, I know, it's sad, isn't it? We're going to bring out from backstage some incredible people who made this happen. Come on, team makers. I want you to get the standing ovation. Come on! Come up here, up here, up here, up here. That's right. Come here, come here, come here. Everybody, everybody, everybody. Okay, ready? I'm not gonna make everybody do a step, but we are gonna do a what? So ready, it's gonna go what? Raise your voice, everybody. Okay? 3, 2, 1. What? Raise your voice.